Greetings, traveller through time. Let me take you to a quiet night in the heart of Aquitaine, sometime in the mid-13th century, when the cold mist of evening drifted across the harvested fields, and the heavy scent of damp earth and wood smoke invited people indoors. Where are you listening from, and what time is it there? This is an invitation to slow down the relentless pace of the modern world and let your thoughts settle into the gentle rhythm of a distant age. An age where faith and the sword shaped the boundaries of existence. Feel the cool night air brush against your face as the noise of daily life fades into a distant whisper, preparing the stage for deeper reflection. The scene unfolds. The fortified abbey of Saint-Bénigne, a solemn structure of dark stone rising against the purple dusk. The sound of the Ave Maria, chanted by monks in their evening choir, drifts through narrow windows, carrying with it a solemn peace that seems to wrap around the entire landscape. Beneath your fingertips, you might feel the roughness of the stone wall by the dirt road, and catch the unmistakable aroma of freshly baked bread escaping from the monastery's kitchen, a simple promise of sustenance. It's within this refuge of silence and devotion that we'll find our character, standing on the threshold of a new life. Inside the chapel, lit only by the flickering glow of beeswax candles, young Leo de Montaigne kneels. His eyes, once accustomed to the luxury of his family's noble halls, now reflect the trembling golden light. He breathes in the heavy, sweet scent of frankincense saturating the air, a fragrance that seems to carry centuries of prayers and penance. Leo is 21, born to inherit a feudal estate, yet he's chosen the austere path of faith and war. Like many abbeys of its time, this one served as both a center of learning and of agriculture. Medieval monasteries were not only places of prayer but also model farms, applying advanced techniques such as crop rotation, ensuring the community's survival and even producing surpluses for trade. Manual labor, ora et labora, was as essential as meditation, and life moved to the rhythm of bells, marking the hours of prayer and toil. Leo recalls the promise made by his recruiter, a seasoned Templar Knight, his skin tanned by the eastern sun and his gaze as hard as tempered steel. The knight had spoken of the glory of serving God, of the honor of protecting pilgrims on their journey to Jerusalem, and of the vast power of the order, an invisible force that moved gold and war across kingdoms. Naive and idealistic, Leo had dreamed of noble combat and perhaps a share of the mythical riches everyone whispered about. In the medieval world, inheritance was governed by strict primogeniture. The eldest son received everything. This left younger sons to seek their destinies elsewhere, in the church, in a king's army, or, like Leo, within a military order. His renunciation of inheritance was no small act. It was a break from comfort in exchange for an uncertain future, driven by a higher sense of purpose. The air inside the chapel is cool, almost icy in the shadows, yet Leo feels a faint warmth in his chest, a mixture of fear and anticipation. He adjusts the hood of his coarse woolen cloak, a rough fabric so unlike the silk he wore just a month ago. His decision to join the Templar Order came from fiery idealism, but also from a longing for a life larger than the quiet management of a minor estate. He remembers his conversation with the abbot, Father Etienne, a man of calm wisdom and deep voice. Etienne hadn't tried to dissuade him, only to warn him of the difference between the wealth of the order and the poverty of its members. The true armor of a knight, the abbot had said, is not the chainmail but humility. The Templars were the most powerful financial institution in Europe, serving as an international bank for kings and popes, yet their members lived in strict asceticism. In his mind's eye, Leo pictures the great Templar fortresses scattered across the Holy Land, massive strongholds serving both as military bases and treasuries. The order didn't merely fight. It managed vast estates, fleets of ships, and networks of credit stretching from London to Jerusalem. This economic power which financed crusades and sustained a standing army, was what had made Leo believe in his innocence, that knights might receive great material reward. But his meditation is broken by a memory. Marguerite, a peasant woman from the nearby village, asking him to pray for her son, a squire recently sent to war. Her request reminded him of the Order's true mission, to protect the weak and defend the faith, an ideal too easily eclipsed by dreams of gold and personal glory. The candlelight begins to waver, casting dancing shadows that turn the chapel's pillars into ghostly shapes. Leo smells the ancient dampness of stone beneath the vaults, a reminder that he's inside something older than any man's fortune. The deepening night brings a calm clarity. He closes his eyes and listens to the steady murmur of the monks' Latin prayers, a repetitive rhythm that soothes the restless mind. This rhythm of the divine office, the prayer of the hours, formed the backbone of monastic life and would soon become his own. The abbot had explained that even on campaign, the Templars tried to keep a similar schedule of prayer, balancing contemplation with action, anchoring the soul in faith. A historical curiosity crosses Leo's thoughts. He remembers that the Templar seal depicted two knights sharing a single horse, a symbol of the poverty and humility of the first brothers. Even as the order grew immensely wealthy, the seal remained, a silent reminder that each man once owned so little he had to share his mount. Leo opens his eyes and contemplates the simplicity of the altar. No ornamentation, just a wooden cross and a silver chalice. The absence of excess stands in stark contrast to the Baroque extravagance of later churches. He begins to understand that the order's wealth wasn't meant for personal comfort, but to sustain its mission, to build fortresses, fund armies in the East, and protect the vulnerable. A soft, unexpected peace fills him. The restlessness for material reward begins to fade, replaced by a quiet sense of belonging to something far greater than himself. He feels the rough cord of his new belt, replacing the jeweled leather one he once wore. The scent of wax and incense grows stronger, and the night outside seems gentler, less foreboding. He recalls the abbot's words about his future salary. There would be no coin, no gold. His sustenance would come in provisions, simple rations of bread, wine, vegetables, and salted pork, a bed in the communal dormitory, his white mantle marked with a red cross, and, most importantly, his horses and weapons, property of the order, yet entrusted to his care. The abbot had described the white mantle as a privilege. At first, only full knights could wear it. Sergeants and squires wore brown or black. The white symbolized purity and renunciation, a constant reminder of their vows of chastity and obedience. Receiving the mantle was like shedding an old skin. It erased his noble past and made him a Miles Christi, a soldier of Christ. Leo feels the chill of the stone under his knees, a discomfort that grounds him in the present moment. This material austerity, he realizes, is a kind of discipline, a way to forge the soul for the hardships of holy war. His thoughts drift eastward, no longer toward treasures to be seized, but toward a land of service where dust and heat would replace Aquitaine's cool air. Outside, the wind sighs around the buttresses of the abbey, the only sound breaking the steady chant. Leo imagines the desert, the relentless sun, the clash of steel upon steel. He wonders if he'll have the strength not only to fight, but to endure the life of deprivation ahead. The Templar life was a stern fusion of monastic discipline and military rigor. Abbot Etienne had promised that the order would provide for all his needs. That was its own kind of freedom, being released from the burden of personal sustenance so that one could focus entirely on the mission. He would no longer need to manage land or wealth. Everything was shared in God's name. This rejection of material individualism was the secret to the order's strength. Leo inhales deeply, the air thick with wax and devotion, feeling lighter with every breath, unburdened by worldly expectations. The idea that his true reward would be salvation and purpose, not gold, begins to root in him as an undeniable truth. He realizes the Order's greatest treasure isn't its wealth, but its unwavering faith and structure. The Aquitaine night deepens, and the only lights are the stars glimmering through the narrow windows and the candles on the altar. It's a poetic invitation, a reminder that while the outer world may be vast and chaotic, there is refuge in the simplicity of service. So let yourself linger in this stillness. Let the silence of the medieval night wrap around you and prepare you for the next steps of this quiet discovery. Still kneeling, Leo lets the calm settle in, noticing how the silence of night amplifies every subtle sound, the occasional creak of the abbey's ancient timbers, the faint crackle of a dying ember in a distant hearth, and the soft sigh of cold air sliding beneath the heavy doors. The chill against his bare feet, he had taken off his fine leather boots, serves as a physical reminder of his new path, a small act of voluntary penance that helps focus the mind. This shedding of comfort is a rite of passage for the life awaiting him. He reflects on the idea of voluntary poverty in the Middle Ages. It wasn't the poverty of beggars, but a structural one. The individual owned nothing, yet the community, or the order, held vast resources. That distinction was vital. The knight was not a pauper, but a man detached, completely dependent on the order for food, shelter, and arms. Such a system ensured unwavering loyalty, free from the distractions of personal property. Leo recalls the detailed description of his future equipment. Every Templar Knight was assigned 3 horses, one for battle, one pack horse, and a lighter one for travel. These horses were essential for survival and mobility across the long, dangerous routes of the East, and were meticulously cared for by the Order. Owning horses was a privilege, but they belonged to the cause, not to the man. A new scent reaches Leo's senses, earthier, less sweet than incense, the smell of wax and oil from a small olive lamp faintly lighting the choir stall. He remembers an odd but true Templar rule. Hunting was forbidden, except for lions. That exception was allowed because it symbolized courage and the fight against evil. Even in moments of rest, the knight was expected to remain ready for both spiritual and physical combat. This peculiar rule captures the constant duality of Templar life, the monastic renunciation intertwined with military discipline. They took vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience like monks, yet were trained as Europe's most formidable warriors. The sound of a sword being drawn was as familiar to them as the toll of the prayer bell. This fragile balance was the source of their power and their uniqueness. Leo pictures the white mantle with its red cross, the image that had first drawn him to the Order. He learns that the red wasn't only a symbol of Christ's sacrifice, but also a practical way to mask blood on the battlefield, a detail born of experience. That cloak was the one garment that truly set him apart, marking him as a member of the elite and placing him under the Pope's direct protection, for the Order answered only to Rome. His thoughts drift toward food. Abbot Etienne had described a simple yet nourishing diet, meat only 3 times a week, except on Christmas and Easter, and meals taken in silence, accompanied by readings from Scripture. Bread, wine, and legumes formed the foundation of sustenance. It was a sharp contrast to the lavish feasts of his youth, where venison and spices filled every table. He imagines a Templar commandery's refectory in the Holy Land, rough wooden tables, the harsh desert sunlight filtering through narrow slits, the clatter of bowls, the quiet chewing, and a single voice reading aloud. He can almost smell olive oil mixed with oregano, a hint of the Mediterranean blending with the austerity of discipline. Life was Spartan, designed to keep the body strong and the mind sharp. Another curious fact returns to him. Wine was often mixed with water, not just out of tradition, but necessity, to make it safe to drink. Wine was the everyday beverage, though drunkenness was strictly forbidden. Sobriety was a virtue, a stark contrast to the frequent intoxication among the feudal nobility. The identity of Miles Christie, soldier of Christ, begins to eclipse that of Leo de Montaigne, noble heir. He would no longer be judged by the size of his estate, but by the strength of his arm and the purity of his faith. He traded a name for a title, Brother Knight. Detachment itself became the true reward, freedom from the bondage of possession. He thinks of his bed, or rather the lack of one. The rule prescribed that knights sleep in their shirts and breeches, often with a lamp burning beside them, a symbol of constant readiness. The bed was a straw sack, simple, coarse, and a daily reminder of vigilance. The notion of a private chamber with curtains and a canopy now felt like a distant, frivolous dream. Leo touches the small medal of St. Christopher his mother had given him. A cold piece of metal in his hand, one of the few personal items he was allowed to keep. He breathes in the icy air and pictures the vast world beyond the abbey walls, a world of war and uncertainty, but also of purpose. This journey was not about accumulation, but surrender. The narrator's calm voice invites Leo to one final thought before rest. Consider the weight of the sword. It's not the weight of steel, but the weight of duty, the burden of a promise to protect all, from the Pope to the humblest pilgrim. That is his true salary, the exchange of gold for transcendence. The bells toll, marking Compline, the last prayer of the day. The monk's chant is low and resonant, a farewell to the fading day and a gentle preparation for sleep. It's a melody of acceptance and peace, seeping through the cold stone walls of the abbey and into Leo's heart. The sense of having chosen rightly grows tangible. He rises, feeling the stiffness in his knees, and walks toward the chapel door. The polished stone floor, worn smooth by centuries of feet, is cold beneath him. The oak door creaks as he pushes it open, a sound that seems to break the seal of stillness itself. The kitchen smoke has long dissipated, leaving only the damp perfume of soil and trees. Leo gazes up at the Aquitaine sky, velvety black, scattered with stars that seem brighter and closer than ever. The vastness of the cosmos mirrors the vastness of his new commitment. He walks toward the novices' dormitory, a separate stone building. Gravel crunches underfoot. Each step lands softly, measured and deliberate. The only light comes from the lantern in his hand, casting a trembling golden circle before him. Leo understands now that the true wealth of the Templar Order lies not in its coffers, but in its discipline, its structure, and the devotion of its men. The individual knight was the poorest member of the richest organization in Europe, and that paradox was the very essence of its moral strength. His final thought, before lying down on his straw bed, is one of deep serenity. He has traded comfort and wealth for an ideal. His reward would not be gold that glitters, but purpose that illuminates. The payment of a Templar, he realizes, isn't minted in coin. It's earned in faith, in simplicity, and in service. With morning's arrival, the sharp chill of Aquitaine's dawn gives way to a dense mist hanging over the abbey's courtyard, filtering the first light into a silver-grey hue that lends the place an air of mystery and expectation. The smell of wet stone and dew lingers, mingling with the faint scent of peat smoke beginning to rise from the kitchen chimneys. After a short but deeply restorative night's sleep, Leo feels renewed by the simplicity of his new routine, the coarse wool of his novice's mantle brushing against his skin. He makes his way to the chapter house for the first meeting of the day, his footsteps muted by the packed earth path. Abbot Etienne is waiting, seated in a heavy oak chair, the weak morning light pooling over the open page of a manuscript. This is Leo's first concrete encounter with the Order's rigor, a life that begins long before vows, rooted in discipline and obedience. The abbot stands for the spiritual authority that merges with the military hierarchy awaiting him. The abbot begins to speak of the Latin rule, the code that governs every Templar Knight's life. He explains that though the order is military, it is at its core monastic, and obedience is the first and most vital vow. His voice is low and measured, shaping each word with care, a sound that draws the listener in. Leo watches the abbot's lined skin and feels the room's cold air, a temperature that keeps the mind alert. A historical curiosity slips into the lesson. The abbot notes that the order's original rule, written around 1129, strictly forbade knights from owning any personal goods, and even laid out details as precise as hair and beard, hair kept short, beards kept long, to convey a respectable, manly bearing. Seemingly trivial points, yes, but they helped build a cohesive, unmistakable identity. Leo catches a subtle, almost medicinal scent rising from the open parchments, the smell of iron gall ink, the standard medieval ink made from iron salts and oak gall tannins. Mixed with old wax, it's the perfume of knowledge, and of the bureaucracy that underpinned the Templars' vast organization. He recalls the abbey scribes he's seen, bent over their copying and record-keeping. Abbot Etienne returns to the matter of a knight's pay, deepening last night's discussion of support. "Your wage, my son," he says, "isn't a purse of coins to make you rich, but the assurance you'll never have to fear poverty. Sustenance is the material reward, provisions for life and war." He lists them plainly: a daily ration of barley and wheat bread, watered wine, cooked vegetables and meat in measured portions, always enough to keep the body strong, never enough to invite gluttony. He stresses that the order's meals were more abundant and regular than most peasants, or even some lesser nobles, would ever know. Here, luxury meant the certainty of not going hungry, not a table groaning with excess. Leo feels a quiet, steady mystery in the irony. The order, with its great treasure, invested in ships, fortresses, and royal loans, yet the man risking his life for it received only the essentials. The structure was designed to strip away personal ambition and replace it with collective devotion. The abbot pauses, and Leo hears the distant bell summoning the community to prime, the first hour of prayer. Its tone is clean and steady, cutting through the chapter house's dense hush. He feels the roughness of the wooden bench beneath him, a small discomfort that keeps him present and focused. Talk turns to equipment. The abbot explains that the order supplies a knight with everything needed for battle, and of the highest quality. A knight doesn't buy his arms; they're entrusted to him as sacred property of the order. Sword, lance, shield, mail, each is issued and must be maintained with utmost care. Mail, the defensive armor of the age, was astonishingly expensive and demanded hundreds of hours at the forge. That the order furnished such fine armor to its men spoke volumes about its power and its commitment to its knight's protection. Even before Leo wears it, he can imagine the feel of interlinked iron rings, cold, heavy, unyielding. The abbot adds that a Templar didn't choose his own weapons, he used what he was given. Uniformity and equality were the rule within the brotherhood. Personal choice in arms was treated as needless vanity. Obedience extended even to the kind of sword a knight would wield. In his mind, Leo contrasts this discipline with the life of a secular knight, proud of his unique harness and personal coat of arms. In the order, the red cross is the only heraldry that matters, the collective symbol replacing the pride of lineage. The abbot then names the last and most crucial element of a knight's wage, the white mantle. It is a sign of glory and purity, but it carries immense responsibility. The color witnesses to chastity and clean intention. To stain the mantle is to stain the order's honor. That garment is also a weapon of the mind. On the field, a Templar in white stands out. To be seen fleeing in that mantle is the greatest disgrace. It becomes a moral armor against cowardice, reinforcing the vow to fight to the end and never retreat unless the odds are truly overwhelming. With a near silent sigh, Leo feels the serenity that comes from a life ordered by rule. The mystery that once clung to the Order's riches gives way to an understanding of its wealth of purpose. He won't receive gold, he'll receive a place in sacred history and a guaranteed livelihood, a kind of security few in the Middle Ages ever knew. The abbot nods to a monk waiting nearby, who steps in with a small clay cup of hot, bitter herbal drink. Breakfast. Leo feels the comforting warmth of the cup in his hands, simple, welcoming. The taste is strong and bracing, a gentle urging for the mind to fully awake. The monk offers Leo a kind smile, acceptance, and it deepens the sense of belonging. Leo is no longer a noble stranger, but a brother in training. Life in the monastery, and later in the commandery, rests on a sturdy sense of fraternity and mutual support, essentials for survival on any battlefield. Another historical note surfaces. The Order's rules were so meticulous that they governed footwear, tunic cuts, even how the knights should sit at table, all to keep excess and vanity at bay. The rule guarded the soul. The air in the chapter house is brighter now. The courtyard mist is starting to lift. Leo senses the slow rise of warmth as the sun finally begins to push through. He fixes on the abbot's voice as it circles back to the idea of sustenance as a privilege. A warning follows. Despite the Order's great wealth, any brother caught with personal gold or silver would be severely punished. The temptation to hoard was treated as a betrayal of the vow of poverty. The Order's riches were for the mission, not for individual enrichment. Leo sees how the Order crafted a shrewd system to secure loyalty and effectiveness. By providing everything necessary and forbidding the superfluous, it stripped away worldly distractions and focused a knight's whole energy on holy war and service. He thinks of his own strongbox at home, once filled with silver coins and trinkets, now a distant memory. The absence of money worry brings a surprising lightness. He feels the freedom that comes with letting go, a calm no gold could ever purchase. Abbot Etienne closes the first session with a final reflection on true wealth. Gold decays, lands are seized, he says in his grave voice, but the merit of serving God with humility and courage, that's the only treasure you can carry with you to the last judgment. Leo rises from the bench, body a little sore, mind crystal clear. He thanks the abbot, the bitter warmth of the herbal infusion still lingering on his tongue. The mystery has lifted, clarity has settled in, payment is purpose. The sun, now partly visible, sends a thin beam through a high window, lighting the floating dust in the chapter house air. It's a quiet image of contemplation, a moment of passage from the darkness of unknowing to the light of understanding, preparing Leo for the next stage of his training. Leo leaves the chapter house and steps into the courtyard, where the rhythmic clang of blacksmiths working in the nearby cloister already fills the air, a steady percussion of labor and preparation, the soundtrack of active monastic life. He feels the coarse touch of mist on his face, already thinning under the first pressure of sunlight breaking through the clouds. The smell of hot metal and coal smoke mingles with the lingering scent of freshly baked bread. He watches a group of sergeant brothers in brown mantles carefully cleaning their leather harnesses and gear. They work in disciplined silence. Though sergeants don't share the knight's status, they form the backbone of the Order, responsible for logistics and much of its infantry strength. Leo realizes the Order is a vast, intricate machine, each part, humble or noble, vital to the whole. He recalls that the Templars were among the few institutions of the age where nobles and commoners worked side by side, though in different roles. The abbot had explained that while knights usually came from noble birth, sergeants and squires were accepted from any social class. Faith and the willingness to serve were the true measures of worth. He approaches one of the sergeants, a broad-shouldered man named Alain, his skin weathered by sun and wind from years of travel. Alain greets him with a respectful nod and keeps polishing his leather belt. Leo catches the strong, greasy scent of tallow oil used to soften and protect the leather, a practical smell, stripped of any luxury or pretense. Without being asked, Alain speaks about the difference between service and ambition. His voice is deep and calm, a sound born of experience. "The mantle you'll wear, brother," he says, "is heavier than any purse of gold. It shields us from the world, and what's left of us belongs to God." That was the philosophy of service. No ownership, no self. Leo watches the slow, precise motions of Alain's hands as he rubs the oil into the leather. A quiet, repetitive gesture that feels almost meditative. He realizes that in Templar life, even the most mundane tasks are performed with the same rigor and reverence. Caring for one's equipment is as sacred as prayer, for a knight's survival depends on the integrity of his tools. Curiosity stirs in him. He remembers reading that the Templars maintained strict breeding programs for their warhorses. They were famed for their strong, disciplined mounts, raised in commanderies across Europe. A horse was such a precious asset that rules even dictated the speed at which it could be ridden to prevent exhaustion. He feels the subtle warmth rising from the packed earth as the sun begins to dry the morning moisture. The cool wind on his neck reminds him of the vast territories the Order commands. This, he understands, is its true wealth, a network of supply and defense stretching across the known world. Alain explains that even food, plain as it was, had a purpose. He tells a story about a young knight who had joined expecting banquets, only to learn the meals were functional, not festive. "Our stomachs are temples, brother, not vaults of vanity," Alain says with a faint smile, his tone carrying quiet acceptance. The smell of burning wood grows stronger now, a sure sign the day's work has begun. Leo realizes that a Templar's true discipline isn't just to fight well, but to live well, measured, sober, and devoted. Material renunciation is merely the first step toward excellence in service. Abbot Etienne had mentioned that although personal possessions were forbidden, each knight was assigned a squire to care for his horses and weapons, a privilege that reflected his military role. The squire, often a youth training to become a sergeant or knight, received provisions and instruction in return for his service. Leo thinks about his future squire, someone not his servant, but a helper provided by the Order. It's a subtle way of preserving military dignity without breaking the vow of poverty. The Order ensures every knight has what he needs to serve effectively. He feels the lightness of his novice's tunic, so different from the heavy, ornate clothes of his past. The coarse wool against his skin reminds him that he's being reshaped, shed of the noble's identity, clothed now as a warrior of Christ. Alain finishes his work and lifts his spear. Leo hears the dry click of wood and metal. The spear, a knight's primary weapon, must be perfectly balanced. Alain explains that its point is always kept razor sharp and its weight precisely tuned for impact. Caring for one's weapon is, in itself, an act of devotion. Leo imagines the vast armories of the Order, rows of spears, swords, and shields, all standardized. That uniformity defines the Templar military system, allowing easy replacement and ensuring disciplined unity, a rarity for the time. The bell rings again, not for prayer but to summon the brothers to fieldwork. Labora joins Aura. Leo feels the faint vibration of the bell through the ground. a physical reminder of the rhythm that governs abbey life. He looks up as the clouds part, revealing an intense blue sky. The sun floods the courtyard, bringing a comforting warmth that drives away the last traces of mist. The chill of morning gives way to a gentle heat, a transition that mirrors the clarity now settling in his heart. Leo's serenity deepens. He no longer misses gold. He values purpose. He's being paid in something far more precious, the honor of wearing the mantle, the assurance of sustenance, and the chance to serve a cause greater than himself. Alain bids him farewell with a nod and joins the other sergeants. Leo walks alone now, absorbing the stillness that follows the flurry of work. The scent of damp earth dominates the air, an aroma of fertility and renewal, a fitting symbol of his own rebirth. He ends this morning's reflection with the image of the Order's seal, 2 knights sharing a single horse, a timeless reminder of humility and brotherhood. The mystery has lifted, replaced by calm understanding. He's ready for the deeper chapters of his new life. In his mind, he envisions the fortress of Safed, one of the great Templar strongholds in the East, not as a vault of treasure, but as a beacon of safety for weary pilgrims. His reward will not be gold locked in chests, but a safe, honorable place to rest after battle. Leo looks up at the vast blue sky above him, a space that fills him with peace and certainty. He has traded possessions for purpose, a life of devotion and discipline. The payment of a Templar, he knows now, is service itself, and the glory of God, the only coin worth keeping. Still in the courtyard, beneath the full morning light of Aquitaine, Leo de Montaigne walks toward the forge, where the sound of hammer striking steel is the most vivid expression of the abbey's military purpose. The sharp, metallic scent of hot iron mingles with the acrid smoke of charcoal. He feels the soft tremor underfoot, the vibration carried through the packed earth by the blacksmith's rhythmic blows. Here, he's about to deepen his understanding of the logistics that sustain a Templar's individual poverty, uncovering the Order's modus operandi. He stops at a respectful distance to observe the blacksmith, a large, silent man with strong arms and a soot-streaked face, forging arrowheads over glowing coals. The orange-red fire is hypnotic, a living flame transforming raw matter into tools of war. This, Leo realizes, is the foundation of sustenance, the ability to produce and maintain the equipment that fuels the mission in the Holy Land. He recalls a key historical detail. Most blacksmiths and craftsmen working for Templar commanderies weren't knights, but serving brothers or hired artisans. They were paid wages and given provisions by the Order to ensure that every weapon and tool met the highest standards. The Order invested heavily in infrastructure and skilled labor. Noticing Leo's presence, the blacksmith looks up, smiles and nods, a wordless acknowledgement. Heat radiates from the forge, both threatening and vital. Leo reflects that this flame is the silent engine of the Holy War, the force that ensures each knight receives a sharp sword and a strong suit of mail, the most practical salary he'll ever know. He listens to the hammering, each strike a firm, repetitive note, the music of discipline and order. This is the sound of the Templar machine in motion. The lack of ornament in the tools and weapons reinforces the principle of function over vanity, the hallmark of the Templar way. Leo begins to meditate on the idea of logistics. The Templar Order was, in truth, the most efficient logistical system of the Middle Ages. He imagines the long supply lines stretching from Europe across the Mediterranean, carrying grain, weapons, horses, even beeswax for candles. A knight's payment, he realizes, ultimately depended on this vast and precise network. Abbot Etienne had once explained that while knights carried no money, they held something far more valuable: access to the Order's credit. The Templars had invented an early form of the traveller's check. A pilgrim could deposit funds at a commandery in Europe and withdraw them safely in Jerusalem or Acre. That financial innovation was part of the protection the order provided, both to pilgrims and to its own men. The faint, dusty taste of charcoal hangs in the air. Leo now understands that the true strength of the order lies not just in arms, but in administration. Its wealth is collective, directed toward mission and mercy. Gold moves the cause forward, never the individual. He leaves the forge and walks to the stables, where the smell shifts sharply to hay, manure, and horse sweat. The quiet sounds of chewing, stamping, and snorting fill the cool, damp air, a soothing, rhythmic chorus. The horse, he thinks, is the Templar's most precious possession, his lifeline and his weapon. He observes the animals, strong, well-kept, unmistakably prized. He remembers learning that horses were inspected regularly, and any knight whose mount showed neglect could face punishment, even the humiliation of sleeping on the ground in penance. That strict care illustrates how deeply the knight's wage depended on responsibility. The horse is part of his livelihood and his effectiveness in battle. The order provides the best, but the knight must safeguard it with devotion. It's a heavy burden, one that replaces the weight of gold. The cool air of the stables makes Leo shiver after the forge's heat. He recalls the 3 horses assigned to every knight, one for combat, one for transport, and one for daily riding. 3 horses for 1 man, a sign of military prestige and wealth in itself. Serenity settles over him as he watches a sergeant murmuring softly to a chestnut horse, the two communicating in quiet trust forged through routine. Leo realizes that by joining the order, he hasn't lost his status, he's transformed it. He's no longer a nobleman with limited lands, but a member of the most powerful military brotherhood in the world, with access to resources far beyond his former wealth, though none of it truly his. He leaves the stables and crosses back toward the central courtyard. From somewhere within the abbey comes the low, solemn chant of a Kyrie, the monks' voices floating through the air, a peaceful counterpoint to the clang of labor, Ora balancing labora. Abbot Etienne had spoken of the dormitories, the final element of a knight's salary. Leo recalls the description, a communal hall where each brother had a marked space, a chest for the few personal items permitted, and a simple straw bed. Privacy was forbidden, a deliberate rule fostering vigilance and brotherhood while discouraging temptation and pride. To sleep among one's brothers was both humble and safe, a shield against corruption of the soul. He touches the rough wool of his mantle, feeling its simplicity. A faint scent of freshly washed linen drifts from a nearby laundry. Even clothing, plain as it was kept clean and serviceable by the order, a quiet symbol of discipline and dignity. Each brother received several tunics and mantles to ensure he always appeared neat, his white garment kept pure, a reflection of spiritual purpose. Care for one's appearance was not vanity, but reverence for the order's vows and image. A final, profound peace fills Leo. The absence of gold, he understands now, is its own protection. Wealth breeds greed, envy, and betrayal. By renouncing it, a knight becomes immune to worldly temptation, his reward entirely spiritual and practical. The sun now stands high, flooding the courtyard with light. Leo notices the crisp shadow cast by his figure, his old life as a nobleman now firmly behind him, absorbed by this new path. He inhales the clean, cold air of the countryside and feels the fullness of his choice. The Templar Order, he realizes, paid its knights not in coin, but in all that truly mattered: sustenance, the finest equipment, a brotherhood unbreakable, and above all, a purpose that transcended life itself. He hadn't traded his fortune for nothing. He had exchanged it for everything. Leo walks now toward one of the abbey's quietest corners, the inner cloister, a square of peace framed by stone arches where the scent of flowers and aromatic herbs planted by the monks replaces the sharp odors of metal and hay. Here, sound softens to the gentle murmur of water flowing from a central fountain, a melody that invites reflection and stillness. His fingers brush the cold stone of a pillar, its smoothness a tactile reminder of the order's endurance. He reflects on the spiritual dimension of his non-payment. Abbot Etienne had explained that renouncing personal wealth was an imitation of Christ, an act of redemption. A Templar Knight exchanged earthly riches for a heavenly treasure, the most valuable transaction of his life. Purpose itself was the true currency. Leo recalls that in the Middle Ages, the Church offered indulgences, remission from the temporal penalties of sin. Joining the Crusades or a military order was considered an act of penitence and merit, worth eternal salvation. The Templars' real wage was the promise of everlasting life, a wealth far beyond gold. He notices a monk walking slowly through the cloister, head bowed in prayer. The monk's deliberate rhythmic pace inspires Leo to slow his own thoughts, letting the restlessness of future battles dissolve into the stillness of the present. Contemplation, he realizes, is the foundation of focus and discipline. Bread in the Middle Ages was not merely food, it was a sacred symbol. The abbot had explained that within the order, bread, though simple, was shared equally among all, from knight to sergeant. That shared loaf symbolized fraternity and equality in Christ, another layer of the order's moral sustenance. Leo stops beside the fountain, watching the clear water ripple. The sound is soft and constant, its coolness a counterpoint to the warmth of sunlight now flooding the courtyard. This contrast between the heat of action and the freshness of contemplation captures the essence of Templar life. He reflects that the order was a domus Dei, a house of God, and all its possessions, from horses to weapons to fortresses, were sacred. Each knight was merely a steward of these goods, not their owner. This distinction between use and ownership formed the very foundation of discipline and detachment. He recalls manuscripts he once saw in the Abbey Library, detailing the order's vast rural estates across Europe, commanderies that produced surplus food and wool shipped to sustain brothers in the Holy Land. The knight's pay came from the agricultural labor of monks and workers far away. Though he receives no gold, Leo realizes he's being paid with security, the assurance of belonging to the most sophisticated logistical network of his time. He will never have to worry about food or weapons. An entire system exists to provide for him. Freedom from worry is, he understands, a form of wealth. His senses pick up the earthy scent of freshly ploughed soil drifting from fields beyond the abbey walls, a smell of labor and harvest, the material base that sustains the spiritual ideal. The contrast between the flower's perfume in the cloister and the scent of tilled earth embodies the balance of this life. He recalls a story told by a monk of a sergeant whose horse was killed in an ambush in Syria. Within days, the man was issued a new one, paid for by revenues from a distant commandery in France. The solidarity of the order was, in truth, the knight's pension fund. From a nearby scriptorium comes the faint scratch of quill on parchment. The scribes, the administrators of the order, track every coin, every bushel, every sword. The efficiency of their record-keeping ensures that each knight's sustenance never fails. Leo realizes that in joining the order, he has traded the uncertainty of family wealth, vulnerable to war or mismanagement, for the stability of an institution that cannot fall. In a world of shifting fortunes, that stability is an incomparable form of pay. He touches the simple wooden rosary now hanging from his belt, light and cool to the touch. The contrast with the heavy gold rings of his past life is stark. Material simplicity feels liberating. It frees the mind to dwell only on what matters. Abbot Etienne had prepared him for the hardships awaiting him in the east, the hunger, the heat, the danger, but also promised that a Templar Knight would never go unfed or unequipped. The order never failed its part of the covenant. Leo draws a long breath of the clean, cool air within the cloister. The fear of poverty, a terror that haunted most medieval lives, has no hold on him now. He has purpose, fine equipment, and a support network that spans continents. He envisions the white mantle he will soon wear, the color of light and purity. It is more than a uniform. It is a symbol of new identity, a badge of honor, and a promise of divine protection. His true salary is dignity and grace. The warmth of the sun on his back urges him toward action. He understands now that the Order's greatest treasure cannot be touched or spent. It must be lived. The dignity of service, the strength of brotherhood, and the certainty of salvation. The fountain's murmur continues, a hymn of constancy and renewal. Leo feels wholly at peace. His understanding is complete. He is not a mercenary, but a devotee, paid in the chance to fulfill his purpose. He walks slowly toward the refectory, where the scent of cooked vegetables and fresh bread awaits. The aroma is simple but honest. He's ready to accept his salary in nourishment and meaning, not in gold. His calm reflection closes with acceptance. Leo pauses for a final moment and looks up at the sky. The vast blue above reminds him of the horizon awaiting him in the east. The journey ahead will not be easy, but it will be meaningful. He has traded a life of luxury for a life of legend. A week has passed at the Abbey of Saint-Benigne, and Leo finds himself standing on the threshold of change. The rhythm of his days, once shaped by monastic prayers and quiet labor, is about to give way to motion. His initial training is complete. He's to be transferred to a fortified Templar commandery near the coast, where he'll depart for the Holy Land. The shift feels tangible. The scent of incense and old wood will soon be replaced by salt air and the mingled odors of travelers and cargo. He stands at the abbey gate, ready to leave. The morning air is cold and dry, the rough wool of his novice's mantle warm against his skin. Abbot Etienne is beside him, his deep, calm voice offering final words of guidance. The moment carries both farewell and purpose. Leo isn't fleeing, he's advancing toward the very heart of his vow. The abbot hands him a small leather pouch containing only a few loaves of bread, some cheese, and a skin of wine, his provisions for a 3-day journey. "This is your immediate sustenance, my son," says the abbot with a gentle smile. "Enough to reach the next commandery, where the order will provide again." The gesture is simple but profound, a living symbol of the Templar promise. He will never be left without support. Leo hears the dry, familiar rhythm of hooves approaching. The abbot has arranged a small escort, Sergeant Alain, a seasoned Templar he already knows, and a young squire who will travel with them. The sight of the 3 horses, strong, sturdy animals, outfitted with plain but reliable gear, hits Leo with the sensory reality of the life he has chosen. He recalls an interesting fact about medieval travel. Journeys were long, slow, and dangerous. The Templar Order often owned and maintained roads and bridges, ensuring safe passage between their properties. Their infrastructure served not just knights, but pilgrims and merchants too, an act of quiet public service. Alain salutes the abbot with respectful brevity, then turns to Leo. "Brother novice, your horse is ready," he says, his voice calm and practical. Leo mounts the brown traveling horse assigned to him, feeling the firm leather of the saddle under his legs and the subtle movement of the animal's muscles beneath him. From this new vantage point, the world opens up. The scent of damp earth and dew rises with the horse's motion. The abbey, once his refuge, now recedes into the distance, its towers dissolving into the morning haze. Alain rides ahead at a steady, deliberate pace. His tone, when he speaks, is measured. He explains that the pace is calculated to conserve the horse's strength, one of the Order's most valuable resources. Discipline, Leo realizes, governs even the rhythm of travel. Curious, Leo asks about life at the coastal commandery. Alain describes it as a hub of trade and training, alive with the smells of dried fish, linen and spices drifting in from ships. It's a noisier, more dynamic world than the Abbey, half spiritual, half commercial. He goes on to explain that Templar architecture mirrors the Order's ideals. Thick walls, few windows, all function and strength, no ornament, no luxury. The buildings, like the men who inhabit them, are designed for endurance. The wind brushes Leo's face, cold enough to make him pull up his hood. The steady beat of hooves on the dirt road fills the air, a hypnotic cadence that quiets his mind. Fields of vineyards and small peasant cottages slide past, the colours muted under the pale sun. A peasant stands by the roadside and bows deeply as the white mantle and red cross come into view. Leo feels a flicker of awe. This, he realizes, is an invisible form of payment, respect, trust, and the recognition of divine service. He remembers a story a monk once told him of a Templar who, caught in an emergency, sought supplies in a remote village. When he revealed his mantle, the villagers provided everything he needed, asking nothing in return. The Order's reputation was its own currency. They halt by a small brook to let the horses drink. The sound of running water breaks the rhythm of travel like a sigh. Leo dismounts, his legs stiff, but the ache quickly gives way to quiet reflection. The air smells of moss and clean water, cool and alive. Alain reminds him that a knight's horse is his lifeline. Caring for it is a duty, not an affection. No ribbons, no bells, he says. A Templar's mount is never for display. The rule against adornment, Leo realizes, extends even to the animals. A lesson in humility. He understands now that mobility itself is a reward. The Order pays for his horses, his gear, and the knowledge of safe routes. His wage is the freedom to move, to serve, to go wherever the mission demands. Behind him rides the young squire, Felix, perhaps 15, silent and intent on his task. His payment, Leo thinks, is education, food, and the promise of advancement within the Order. For him, learning itself is the coin of reward. As the sun climbs, warmth seeps through the thick wool of Leo's cloak. He is riding south, toward heat and toward destiny. The subtle shift in temperature mirrors the greater transformation unfolding within him. Alain signals, and they resume their journey. The rhythmic drumming of hooves resumes, steady as prayer. When Leo glances back, the Abbey has vanished completely. He is now fully committed to the road ahead. Abbot Etienne's words echo in his mind. A Templar's true armor is adaptability. The Order operates across extremes, from England's cold to Syria's desert heat. To renounce comfort is to embrace resilience. Leo feels an unexpected calm as this truth settles in. He is in control of his choice, if not of his individual fate. His destiny now belongs to the Order, and in surrendering it, he feels liberated. By midday, the landscape has opened wide, the forest giving way to low, sunlit scrub. The scent of dry grass and warm stone fills the air. Somewhere ahead lies the sea, the gateway to the east. He recalls that the Templars were wealthy enough to own entire fleets of ships, transporting men and supplies to the Holy Land. Even that passage, his final leg toward Jerusalem, is part of the Order's provision. His voyage is paid for not with coin, but with faith. He imagines those ships, red crosses on white sails, cutting through the blue expanse of the Mediterranean. Soon the scent of tar, rope and salt will replace the cool air of the hills. Movement itself is the essence of his calling. Alain points toward a distant rise, where a stone tower catches the sun. "There's our commandery for the night," he says. "A safe house and a hot meal." The promise of shelter and food feels like the simplest and most precious of gifts. Leo feels serenity settle over him. He won't need to search for lodging or worry for his horse's safety. The Order provides, always, That reliability is the cornerstone of his new life. The sun dips low, casting long shadows. The air cools, touched by the moisture of the nearby sea. The day's journey draws to its quiet close, filled not with fatigue, but with certainty. Leo gazes toward the horizon, not for gold that will never come, but for the purpose that guides him forward. He is being paid with the chance to stand where history unfolds, sustained and protected by a brotherhood of faith and discipline. As the tower looms nearer and the horses slow, Leo feels a deep sense of belonging. He has entered a world where wealth is measured not in coins, but in conviction, and in that currency he is already rich. The commandery for the night, known as the Tower of Saint-Jules, emerges from the twilight shadows. It's humbler than the abbey, yet its solidity is unmistakable, built entirely for military and logistical function. The air hums with the creak of iron hinges as the main gate swings open to welcome them. Leo catches the scent of wood smoke, and unexpectedly the warm aroma of olive oil and herbs, a promise of supper. Relief washes over him. His body aches from the long ride, but the feel of the stone courtyard beneath the horses' hooves, a shift from soft earth to rough paving, signals safety. They're greeted by a middle-aged sergeant, the steward of the commandery, whose calm, efficient face mirrors years of steady discipline. There's no ceremony here, just the quiet precision of Templar order at work. Alain explains that this post serves as a supply station for traveling knights. Abbot Etienne had once told Leo that these rural estates were the true source of the order's wealth, the farms, mills, and vineyards that fueled its military might in the east. The Templars' gold, it seemed, was harvested from the soil. Leo remembers reading that most commanderies had vast granaries, cellars, and forges, self-sufficient hubs capable of feeding and equipping an army. The complexity of their management ensured every knight's salary in food, tools, and horses. Alain leads Leo and the young squire Felix to the dormitory. The hall is stark, lined with straw beds beneath the dim glow of oil lamps. The air smells faintly rancid from the oil, but it's warm, a welcome contrast to the chill outside. Leo removes his mantle and folds it carefully as instructed. His simple wool tunic clings softly to his skin. Around him, each knight has only a wooden chest for his few belongings. No ornaments, no comforts, just function. Poverty here is discipline in its purest form. The low murmur of conversation drifts through the hall. The topics are practical: horse conditions, supply quality, the day's distance covered. No one speaks of wealth or rank. Among the Templars, service itself is the only measure of worth. At the courtyard well, Leo washes his face and hands. The water is icy, the sensation both bracing and cleansing. He scrubs away the dust and sweat of travel, breathing in the sharp scent of pure water. Cleanliness isn't vanity here, it's order. He recalls one of Alain's stories. A sergeant once expelled from the order for selling part of his gear for coin. The punishment had been severe, for such an act was not mere theft, it was betrayal of the vow of poverty. The Templar discipline allowed no cracks in its armor. As Leo dries his hands, he reflects that tonight's meal, pork stew and lentils, was his payment, provided through the labor of peasants on this very land. He doesn't need coins. The great Templar network ensures every brother is fed, clothed, and equipped. That certainty brings him peace deeper than any fortune could. Alain calls him to the refectory. The smell of salted meat and simmering vegetables greets him at the door. The sound of boots and the gentle clatter of wooden bowls mark the start of dinner. Torches flicker on the walls, releasing the scent of resin and smoke. The meal is plain but hearty. Leo chews the hard bread and thick stew, savoring the earthy saltiness. As he eats, scripture is read aloud in a slow, measured tone. a reminder that food exists to fuel service, not pleasure. His hand brushes against the smooth, worn wood of his spoon. That simple object, passed through countless hands, feels human, almost sacred. He understands now that simplicity is not deprivation, but freedom. The absence of indulgence sharpens both mind and spirit. Afterward, Leo and Felix help clear the tables. Cleanliness and order are as vital as prayer or battle. Every brother serves. The act blurs the old lines of social rank. Nobles and commoners alike united by shared labor. Ilan invites them to the chapel for compline, the final prayer of the day. Their steps are slow and deliberate, the pace of reflection. The night air is cool against Leo's cheeks as he crosses the courtyard under a sky scattered with stars. Inside, the chanting begins, a low, resonant harmony that fills the small stone chapel. Leo kneels, the cold floor pressing through his tunic. The faint scent of beeswax candles and incense wraps around him, drawing him back into that familiar peace he'd known in the abbey. He senses the day's rhythm balancing itself again, motion giving way to stillness, duty to devotion. The Templar life, he realizes, is built on this perfect tension. The wage is the privilege of living within that balance. He recalls one last detail from the abbot's teachings. In every Templar dormitory, a lamp must remain burning through the night, to ward off evil and temptation, but also as a sign of eternal vigilance. The flame itself is both symbol and commandment. Stay ready. Back in the dormitory, the sound of straw rustling as men settle into their beds fills the hall. The noise is comforting, communal. Leo folds his mantle once more and lies down, the coarse straw shifting beneath the weight of his body. The warmth of his wool tunic against the rough bedding feels primitive yet honest. He remembers the luxury of his old life, the silken sheets, the soft mattress, and realizes that sleep now comes easier. Simplicity has stripped away the restlessness of possession. His mind drifts to the future. His salary won't be measured in silver, but in purpose, the chance to stand at the heart of the struggle for faith, sustained by the most formidable brotherhood in Christendom. As he closes his eyes, the distant chanting fades into silence. He is safe, fed, and certain of his path. The reward has already been given. It is purpose itself. Leo drifts into sleep beneath the flickering lamp, content in the knowledge that he has traded gold for legend. It's the third day of travel, and Leo now finds himself at a great coastal commandery, the beating logistical heart of the Templar passage to the east. The atmosphere has changed completely. The air is thick with salt, and the constant sound of Mediterranean waves breaking against the shore replaces the stillness of the countryside. The sharp tang of dried fish, ship tar and sea air fills his senses, an unmistakable promise that the Orient lies near. This is a moment of quiet observation, a chance to focus on a single gesture, a habit that reveals the essence of Templar life. Leo stands in the courtyard beside a massive stable, watching an older knight, Gervais, carefully clean his chainmail. Gervais is a man of few words. His long grey beard and methodical movements speak of decades of service. Bent over the heavy armor of interlinked steel rings, he is the very image of humility through discipline. Each motion is slow and deliberate. With a small cloth soaked in fine sand and oil, Gervais polishes each section of the mail, removing rust and grime. Leo can almost feel the rough chill of the metal as he watches. This is the care a knight owes to his most vital wage, the armor that protects his life, and that belongs not to him, but to the order. He recalls a historical truth. Maintaining chainmail was a constant burden. To keep it from rusting, its greatest enemy, Templars stored it in bags of sand and oil, or rubbed it daily, just as Gervais does now. It was tedious work, but it was sacred work. The rhythmic rasp of cloth against steel is soft but steady, like a whispered chant. Gervais performs it with silent devotion, the repetition reflecting the order's monastic rigor. This armor is no ornament, it's a consecrated tool. Caring for it is an act of worship, part of the knight's spiritual payment. Without looking up, Gervais speaks in a gravelly voice. Your mantle, novice, is given by God, but this mail, this is kept by your hands. His meaning is clear. The order provides the armor. The knight's diligence preserves it. The order's gift is the equipment. The knight's return is his effort. The smell of linseed oil and iron drifts in the breeze, a practical, earthly scent, far from the sweetness of incense. It's the smell of reality, of readiness. Leo realizes that true Templar poverty doesn't mean idleness, it means labor. No matter his noble birth, every knight must serve through work. He recalls a story told by a sergeant. A young knight once neglected his mail, letting it rust. As punishment, he was forced to wear the corroded armor into battle, a deadly burden and a lasting lesson. Carelessness in this life could kill. Gervais looks up briefly, his eyes steady but weary. He explains that armor size and weight are standardized. No gold trim, no embellishments. Vanity is forbidden. Armor exists for survival, not display. The humid sea breeze brushes Leo's face. Around him, the commandery hums with life. The shouts of laborers in Latin and French, the creak of rigging, the cry of gulls overhead. Here, ascetic devotion meets the commerce of the world. He notes the paradox. The order itself is immensely wealthy, yet the individual knight owns nothing beyond what he carries. His salary lies in provisions, not possessions, in access, not ownership. Gervais resumes his work, the cloths rasping, blending with the background murmur of the port. Watching him, Leo feels a calm sense of belonging. Honor, he realizes, isn't found in gold, it's in duty. In joining the order, Leo hasn't just gained a new identity and purpose. He's adopted a new scale of values, one where cleanliness, function, and readiness outweigh luxury. Maintaining one's tools is an act of faith. He walks to the stables, where the thick scents of hay, sweat, and manure mingle. Inside, he finds young Felix grooming one of the horses bound for the voyage. The animal shifts its weight, muscles rippling under its sleek coat, the living half of a knight's salary. Felix speaks quietly, explaining that the order's horses are fed the finest grain. In fact, barley seeds from Europe are shipped eastward to ensure consistent quality in the Holy Land. The order's attention to detail, Leo thinks, is its real wealth. He lays a hand on the horse's flank, feeling the warmth of its body, a pulse of life and strength. He remembers another rule. No Templar may trade or sell a horse without the master's approval. Each animal belongs to the order, a sacred trust rather than a possession. Caring for a horse, like caring for armor, demands detachment. The knight cannot claim it as his own, only keep it ready for battle. The wage is the privilege of stewardship, not ownership. Leo begins to understand that Templar life is a dance between personal poverty and institutional abundance. Individually, he owns nothing. Collectively, he commands the finest tools and infrastructure in Christendom. That paradox is what makes the system unbreakable. He recalls Abbot Etienne's lesson about sleeping clothed. A Templar must always be ready for the call. Even rest is a form of vigilance. Readiness is the thread that binds all their vows together. The rhythmic clanging of a blacksmith's hammer echoes from a nearby forge, striking iron in time with the waves. It's the soundtrack of the order's existence. Repair, replenish, repeat. Their salary is the assurance that nothing is ever left in disrepair. Leo breathes deeply, finding serenity in this cycle of labor and care. He's traded the idleness of nobility for the devotion of the warrior monk, and the exchange feels righteous. His purpose is no longer inherited, it's earned. The sun climbs high, and the Mediterranean light turns blinding, reflecting off metal and water alike. The heat intensifies the smell of tar and salt. Leo feels it in his skin, a prelude to the journey ahead. He glances toward Gervais, who's finishing his work. The armor gleams, spotless, alive, under the sunlight. It's a small miracle, an image of inner purity made visible through physical labor. The knight's payment is readiness itself. Leo realizes that this humble act of maintenance, this daily rhythm of service, isn't servitude, but gratitude. He's not repaying the order with gold, but honoring it with sweat. Sergeant Alain approaches, calling Leo to a meeting about the sea crossing. Movement once again lies ahead. Yet Leo feels utterly at home in this commandery, a place where discipline, purpose, and provision intertwine. As the waves crash beyond the walls, he takes one last look at the shining armor, at the horses, at the men preparing for departure. He may not be rich in coin, but he is rich in purpose, in brotherhood, in certainty. His payment, he now knows, is security, and the unshakable privilege of serving. Leo follows Sergeant Alain down the dim corridor toward the map hall, the air thick with the smell of damp stone and aged parchment. A steady whistle of sea wind seeps through the cracks in the walls, a soft, persistent reminder of the crossing that awaits. His hand glides over the smooth, cold surface of the masonry, its solidity grounding him against the restless energy of the coast. Inside the hall, a vast map stretches across a table of oak, drawn on stretched goatskin, its edges curled and darkened by time. Inked lines trace maritime routes toward the Levant, dotted with ports, dangers, and the fortified outposts of the Templar network. Alain, his voice steady and deliberate, uses a wooden pointer to mark the path ahead. He explains that their voyage will be aboard one of the Order's own ships, funded, built, and maintained by its immense logistical system. This, he says, is yet another part of a Templar's wage, guaranteed passage and protection. No pirate's toll, no fare to pay. The knight's journey is fully sustained by the collective strength of the Order. Leo understands then that the Templars function not only as monks and warriors, but as bankers and navigators. Their network ensures that wealth moves safely from Europe to the Holy Land, transforming the invisible power of money into food, armor, and ships. Though no coin ever passes into a knight's hand, it is this silent financial machine that keeps him alive. The scent of the sea drifts through the open window, salt, tar, and candle wax mingling with the musk of parchment. Outside, the waves crash endlessly, a low and steady hymn of purpose. The map before him glistens faintly in the lamplight, its ink lines alive with promise and peril. He glances at Gervais, the grizzled knight standing nearby. The older man listens attentively, though his eyes seem far away, anchored to memories of voyages past. There's a deep calm about him, the stillness of someone who has long made peace with danger. Gervais leans toward Leo and murmurs, "On my first crossing, I clung too tightly to my chest of belongings. When the storm came, I nearly drowned trying to save it. The sea novice takes what isn't essential, faith and memory. Those are the only treasures that stay with you." The words settle in Leo like salt on skin. Detachment, he now understands, isn't just a virtue, but a survival skill. The unpaid life of a Templar is a constant rehearsal for loss, a training in letting go. The air inside the hall feels cooler now, heavy with moisture. Leo realizes that true safety lies not in possessions, but in trust. Trust in the structure of the Order, in its brotherhood, in God. For the first time, he feels fully enclosed within that invisible armor of belonging. Alain continues his briefing. The ships will carry not only knights, but also grain, arms, tools, and medicines. The Order's routes ensure that every fortress in the east stays supplied. that every brother's salary in food and equipment is guaranteed, even across oceans. Leo recalls another curious rule. Even at sea, the Templars' strict diet was maintained, meat no more than 3 times a week, except on feast days. Even amid storms and hardship, discipline never faltered. Alain places a firm, reassuring hand on Leo's shoulder. "You're not going alone," he says quietly. "The Order is your ship." That, Leo realizes, is the truest form of payment, the certainty that he belongs to something greater than himself. The meeting ends. Leo steps back into the courtyard, where the sun is sinking behind the horizon. The sky burns with streaks of orange and violet, and the damp evening air cools his face. From the harbor beyond the walls, he can see white sails waiting in silence, catching the last light of the day. The smell of salt and smoke mixes with the scent of food cooking, lentils, bread, and herbs. Fires flicker near the kitchens, their glow mirrored in the bronze fittings of helmets and shields. It's the scent of expectation, of departure and devotion. He returns to the dormitory where the oil lamps cast long, soft shadows across the room. Voices murmur in low tones, the straw rustles under shifting bodies. Leo lays his simple sword beside his bed, a blade of tempered steel, plain but perfect. It isn't his to own, but to wield. The weapon is both a gift and a vow, the purest payment of honor. He lies down on his straw mattress. The rough texture presses through his tunic, but instead of discomfort it brings calm. He has traded luxury for purpose, gold for meaning. Outside, the rhythm of the waves fills the night, a slow, endless lullaby. Each surge and retreat feels like a heartbeat, echoing the pulse of destiny drawing nearer. The sense of belonging envelops him completely. He is protected, sustained, and guided by an invisible hand. The wealth of the Order is his shield, its faith, his provision. Closing his eyes, he exhales softly, feeling the quiet joy of needing nothing. No lands to manage, no debts to fear, only the duty to serve. The freedom of detachment is his truest wage. In his mind's eye, he sees again Gervais' armor gleaming in the sun, the image of a soul purified by service. He mirrors that brightness now within himself. His breathing slows, falling in rhythm with the sea. Serenity rises like the tide within him. He is ready for the crossing, for the calling, for the life that awaits beyond the horizon. Leo drifts into sleep, certain that his reward is purpose and his sustenance faith. The night closes gently, carrying him toward the promise of dawn and the sea that will take him east. Morning arrives with a sudden fury of wind. The banners of the Order snap violently against the masts, their sound sharp and relentless. Leo stands at the pier, surrounded by the overwhelming scent of salt, fish, and tar, a dense, almost tangible fog of labor and sea. The chill of salt mist brushes his face, as if the air itself were testing his resolve. Around him, the harbor is alive, a living organism of motion and command, the heartbeat of the Templar world revealed in full scale. He realizes now that the coastal commandery, which once felt immense and self-sufficient, is merely one cog in a vast machine, a network that stretches from the farmlands of France to the fortresses of Acre. The docks overflow with life and purpose, bundles of wool, barrels of wine and barley, crates of weapons, tools and grain. Every item is the product of unseen hands, peasants, monks, merchants, whose labor fuels the mission of the few who sail east. This, Leo understands, is his true salary, sustenance born of collective faith and effort. At the edge of the quay, Sergeant Alain directs the loading of horses, an operation as perilous as it is essential. The animals neigh and stamp nervously while cranes creak overhead, ropes stretching and snapping in the wind. Alain's calm voice cuts through the noise, guiding men and beasts alike with practiced precision. The horse, the most prized possession of any knight, is handled not as property, but as sacred trust. Leo recalls one of the Order's lesser-known truths. Behind the armor and banners stood an empire of land and labor. The Templars were among the largest landholders in Europe, their fields tended by thousands of peasants. It was their sweat, not coin, that paid for this voyage, this ship, this mission. His wage was the sum of 1,000 unseen labors. He grips the coarse, tarred rope beside him, its fibers wet and rough beneath his palm. Gervais's words echo in his memory, how the ship was both cradle and coffin, salvation and peril. The sea, the veteran had said, reminds a man how small he truly is. The vessel beneath him is more than transport. It is dependence made visible, the floating symbol of the Order's unity. The ship itself looms before him, broad and sturdy, its sails emblazoned with the Red Cross. To Leo, it's the embodiment of divine organization, the Order's wealth turned into movement, each plank, each nail, paid for, not in gold, but in obedience and faith. The passage is free, yet it costs everything. Nearby, Alain supervises the loading of supplies with an accountant's precision. Every barrel is marked, every crate logged. Leo recalls another curiosity. The Templars were unrivaled in record-keeping and financial administration. Their ledgers, more than their swords, built the foundation of their power. The true battlefield, he realizes, is efficiency. Gervais appears beside him, tightening a strap on his mail. The old knight gives a dry chuckle and gestures toward the chaos of cargo and crew. "All this, novice," he says, his voice low and gravelly, "is our treasury, not gold, but order." The smell of pitch grows stronger as the ship's bell tolls, a solemn, resonant sound that marks the threshold between safety and faith. The wind sharpens, the sky dims with an approaching cloud. Leo boards, the wooden planks firm yet trembling underfoot. The motion of the sea a slow, deliberate pull toward destiny. Behind him, Europe begins to fade. He recalls yet another fact of the Order's strength. Their immunity from taxes and tolls, granted by popes and kings alike. Exempt from worldly burdens, they funneled every saved coin into the machinery of faith. Even their privilege was structured as service. Alain's voice rises again, steady over the roar of the waves. He reminds the men that discipline does not end at sea. Prayers will be said at dawn and dusk. Silence will be observed at meals. The ocean may test their bodies, but the rule must anchor their souls. The first heave of the ship unsettles Leo's stomach, a rush of nausea, quickly replaced by stillness. He grips the railing, breathing in the sharp scent of wet wood and salt. The sea feels endless, but his mind is calm. Possession no longer matters. Movement is his wealth. Gervais stands near the bow, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "The sea," he says softly, "teaches humility. It takes everything but your will to serve. Discipline is the only treasure the water can't steal." The wind howls through the rigging, a ceaseless, high-pitched note that fills the air like a hymn. Leo realizes that this wind, this invisible force, is the true engine of the Order. Nature may not serve man, but the Templars have learned to harness it, to build ships that bend but never break. He remembers something Abbot Etienne once said, that some knights, after years of service, returned home only to find their castles unbearable in their silence and luxury. They longed for the simple rigor of the commandery, for the peace of purpose. Wealth had become noise, simplicity, the song of the soul. Leo feels that same serenity now. The ship moves, and with it, his life. He has traded ownership for belonging and comfort for meaning. His salary is motion, being carried toward a higher cause. He looks around him, the provisions below deck, the horses in the hold, the bread in his pack. Every fragment of this journey is sustained by an unseen network of brothers and believers. stretching across continents. It is a web not of power, but of trust. When Alain distributes the day's rations, barley bread and salted fish, Leo eats quietly. The food is plain, but enough. The salt stings his tongue, the bread tastes of the earth. Sustenance, not indulgence. This too is his pay, the assurance of survival. The Mediterranean sun climbs higher, burning through the haze, casting silver light across the restless water. Leo feels the heat on his mantle, the salt drying on his lips. He gazes eastward, toward a horizon without end, and for the first time, he truly understands. He is part of something vast and eternal, an ocean of faith, discipline, and purpose flowing toward a single light. The voyage stretches on, the monotony of blue horizon broken only by the quiet choreography of sailors at work. Though not knights, they are brothers in service, bound to the same purpose. Leo watches them adjust the sails, feeling the coarse texture of thick rope in his hand. The shouted Latin commands and the creak of timbers blend into a rhythm all their own, a heartbeat of the sea. Sergeant Alain explains that both the ship and its crew are paid for by the Order's collective treasury. It's a brilliant system, one that guarantees loyalty and safety alike. The logistical salary extends to all who serve the mission, from knight to sailor to craftsman. The Order is more than an army. It's an employer, a sanctuary, a world sustained by structure and devotion. Leo recalls what he once read about the Templars' social hierarchy. Knights of noble birth, sergeants of lesser lineage, brothers of service who manned ships and workshops, and even Donati, aged men who gave their possessions to the Order in exchange for a place within its walls. It was a complete society, open to any soul willing to surrender self for purpose. He thinks of his own renunciation, how he gave up lands and title, yet finds kinship with these sailors who work for coin. Even Alain, who has guaranteed provisions instead of pay, serves without gold. Their common bond is surrender. Whether noble or laborer, they've all traded ownership for meaning. The smell of dried fish and sour wine drifts from the cargo hold, mingled with salt and wood. It's pungent, earthy, the scent of sustenance. That odor is, in truth, the aroma of his wages, real food, real faith made tangible. Nearby, Gervais sits sharpening his dagger with a whetstone. The soft scrape of steel on stone repeats like a mantra. His silence is a sermon in itself, the discipline of readiness. When he lifts his gaze toward the horizon, Leo follows his eyes and spots a faint silhouette of another vessel. "Our escort," Gervais murmurs. "Payment in safety." Indeed, one of the Order's own warships follows nearby, its crimson cross faint against the haze. The Templars protect their own. Their reputation alone deters most pirates. Their organization finishes the work. In this system, protection itself is part of the wage, security bought not with silver, but with solidarity. Leo recalls a story Alain once told. A secular merchant ship had been raided, its cargo lost to the sea. Templar vessels, however, were rarely attacked. To strike them was to strike the church itself, a foolish gamble few dared to make. The sun climbs high, blazing across the deck. Beneath his wool mantle, Leo feels sweat forming along his neck. He thirsts. Alain brings him a cup drawn from a barrel marked with the red cross. The water is cool, clear, blessed by diligence. Even refreshment, he realizes, is part of the collective salary, the reward of belonging to an order that plans for every need. He remembers another rule. The horses in the hold receive special care, clean straw, measured grain, fresh water whenever possible. The order records each feeding with precision. A horse, after all, is not property. It's an asset of faith, essential to the holy campaign. The thought fills him with wonder. The Templars have built a society parallel to the world's, a self-sustaining system immune to ordinary economics. Within it, money ceases to matter. Obedience is the true currency. The wind softens, the sails swell lazily, and the ship's rocking becomes gentle, steady. A calm spreads through Leo, deeper than rest, an acceptance of the rhythm that governs all things. He realizes now what this journey has been teaching him. Individual poverty is the source of collective wealth. Each night's vow of simplicity strengthens the whole. The more one gives up, the stronger the order becomes. He walks to the bow and grips the cool iron railing. The horizon stretches endlessly before him, pure and blue. The sea's scent is clean, almost holy. He closes his eyes, breathing it in. Every wave whispers the same truth. He is part of something vast. The cold metal under his hands feels grounding, a reminder of the vow of obedience that anchors his life. Discipline is his true payment. It's the invisible chain that binds freedom to purpose. He thinks of his sword, the horse below deck, the bread in his pack, all gifts of the order. He hasn't lost wealth, he's traded it for absolute provision. Alain's voice calls again, summoning the brothers for inspection. Leo draws his dagger, its weight firm and reassuring. Caring for his weapon feels sacred. Each polish, each inspection, a small act of reverence for the salary entrusted to him. When the inspection ends, he looks up at the vast sky. The blue seems endless, mirroring the boundless purpose that now defines his life. Ahead lies the Holy Land, and with it the fortress that will receive him, already stocked, already waiting, paid for by faith and structure. The sound of the sea has quieted to a steady murmur. The ship glides forward like a thought in prayer. Leo moves with it, his heart synchronized with the waves, with the order, with God. He settles into his resting place, feeling the quiet luxury of needing nothing. Everything necessary has been given, everything unnecessary has been stripped away. His final thought before sleep drifts through him like a blessing. The payment is not gold, but service, and service, he now knows, is freedom. After many days at sea, the Templar ship anchors briefly at Cyprus, an island that serves as a vital logistical outpost for the order before the final leg to the Holy Land. The change in rhythm is immediate. The turbulence of the open sea gives way to a calm pause. The air here is warmer, drier, and laced with scents Leo has never known: citrus, spice, and sun-baked earth. The steady crash of waves is replaced by the murmur of a crowd and the song of unfamiliar birds, a soft reprieve after the monotony of wind and water. He and his companions, knights and sergeants alike, are housed in one of the Order's great estates on the island. The fortress gleams under the Mediterranean sun, its white stones bright as bone. It feels like a vault made of light, a storehouse of men, gold and faith. To stand within its walls is to feel safe, another form of payment, the wage of protection. During the pause, Leo wanders into an inner garden, a place of stillness perfumed by jasmine and myrtle. He sits on a sun-warmed stone bench, tracing his fingers across the smooth surface, and lets his mind settle. This isn't rest, it's observation. The garden is a microcosm of the Templar world, order and serenity amid movement and power. From where he sits, he can see a courtyard beyond the archway, where Greek and Venetian merchants bargain with the Order's administrators. The contrast is striking. The merchants wear rich fabrics, their voices animated. The Templars, in plain robes and controlled gestures, negotiate vast sums with the calm of men untouched by greed. Leo realizes then that though he receives no gold, gold itself fuels the Order, the lifeblood of its silent empire. He recalls that after Jerusalem fell, Cyprus became the beating heart of Templar logistics and finance, their treasury, their archive, their sanctuary. The salary that sustains him is built upon this invisible network of wealth and precision, greater than any kingdom he has known. Sergeant Alain joins him quietly, sitting beside him in the dappled light. He nods toward an ancient olive tree at the center of the garden. "The world here is different, novice," he says softly. "Here, a knight can see the value of what he gave up." The words sink into Leo like sunlight through stone. The heat on his skin is dry and intense, so different from the cool air of the abbey in Aquitaine. Yet he feels prepared, his discipline acting like armor against the change. Elan explains that the brothers stationed here guard the treasury of the order, not merely piles of coin, but ledgers, contracts, and letters of credit. The Templars' true wealth lies not in gold, but in trust. A man could deposit his fortune in Paris and reclaim it in Cyprus or Acre with nothing more than a coded parchment. Faith itself had become currency. Leo remembers a cautionary tale Alain once told. A knight in Cyprus, tempted by the proximity of riches, stole gold from the vaults. He was caught, stripped of his mantle, and expelled. His sin wasn't just theft, it was betrayal. Without the order, he was no one. That story lingers. The absence of personal payment is not punishment, but test. The wealth surrounding the knights is a mirror for temptation, and the white mantle, so simple, so pure, is the shield that guards them from it. From somewhere beyond the walls, a church bell rings. A low, sonorous tone, different from the bells of France, yet equally solemn. The sound reminds Leo that this land is a crossroads of cultures and creeds. The Templars stand between worlds, mediating through faith and discipline. He runs his fingers over the wooden rosary at his belt. The lack of possessions no longer feels like loss. It feels like freedom. He has traded a fragile inheritance for a place within an institution that manages the wealth of nations. Through the archway, Alain points to a group of brothers loading crates of provisions: olive oil, grain, salted meat. The air fills with the warm, earthy scent of their labor. "That," Alain says, "is our coin, the food that feeds the brothers in the East. Every hand that lifts, every grain that's shipped, it all pays for someone's strength." Leo nods, breathing in the aroma of oil and sun. For the first time, he truly grasps it. His reward isn't gold, but the assurance that everything he needs will be there when duty calls. The collective labor of the order is his provision. The sun now stands high above the fortress, turning the stones white and the shadows deep. Heat radiates from every surface, enveloping him in a stillness that feels almost sacred. As he gazes again at the olive tree, its gnarled trunk, its silver-green leaves, he understands its meaning. It is peace amid duty, stillness amid movement, the perfect symbol of a knight's renunciation. The pause ends, not with restlessness, but with quiet clarity. Leo rises, ready to continue. The world beyond Cyprus waits, but so does the purpose that brought him here. Still within the quiet garden of the Templar fortress in Cyprus, Leo deepens his contemplation. The air smells of warm earth and unfamiliar plants. The scent seems to hum beneath the sun. Around him, the life of the island moves at its own gentle rhythm, a blend of monastic discipline and Mediterranean color. The song of birds fills the silence, weaving a serene melody that feels almost sacred. He studies the thick stone walls enclosing the garden, their pale surface glowing under the light. They radiate permanence, a kind of immovable peace. This sense of physical safety, he realizes, is the most tangible of all the wages the order provides. The true wealth of the Templars isn't in gold, but in their ability to protect men, goods, and souls, so that every brother can focus entirely on his purpose. He recalls how the island itself once belonged to the Order. The Templars had purchased Cyprus outright, turning it into a sovereign stronghold, a kingdom within kingdoms. That act alone reveals the scope of their power, not just as monks or warriors, but as rulers in their own right. A memory surfaces. the story of a sergeant who had lost his family to a raid in Europe and sought refuge here. The order gave him a new life, a role within its vast machine. In service he found peace, a new family, a new home. That too was a kind of salary, belonging. Sergeant Alain rises and circles the old olive tree, his step slow and deliberate. When he speaks, his voice is barely more than a whisper. "Here, novice, there's no gold for us, but what we gain is far heavier. I traded a small estate for the wealth of serving every realm." His words seem to merge with the rustling of the leaves, wisdom carried on the breeze. Leo runs his hand over the warm stone of the bench. The heat and solidity under his palm echo the constancy of the order itself. In a world ruled by war and uncertainty, the Templars have built something enduring, a sanctuary of order amid chaos. He remembers an authentic curiosity about Templar hygiene. Unlike many nobles of their time, the brothers observed strict rules about cleanliness, bathing on permitted days. It wasn't luxury, it was discipline, an act of respect for the body as a vessel of service. Such rigor, Leo thinks, was another form of armor. The rich aroma of olive oil drifts from a nearby press. It's the scent of sustenance, of lamps and food and trade. The order produced its own oil, self-sufficiency distilled into fragrance. It's the smell of a system that feeds itself. He notices again the contrast between the Templars' plain tunics and the bright, embroidered garments of the merchants in the courtyard beyond. Simplicity is their badge of honor, a uniform that protects them not from weapons, but from envy and desire. A bell tolls within the fortress, clear and resonant. The sound slices through the calm like a call to wakefulness. It signals the next hour of labor. The rhythm of service resumes as it always does. Reflection for a Templar is never an escape, only a pause before obedience. Leo understands now that when he joined the order, he was paid not in coins, but in a way of life, one that trains body and mind to endure scarcity without fear. The Templar path is a school of resilience, and austerity is its tuition. He thinks of the pilgrims who rely on the order's protection. They pay small fees to travel under the Templar banner, and in return receive safe passage, shelter, and food. It's a divine transaction, and Leo's salary is his place within that chain of guardianship, a living link in a vast network of faith. Alain turns toward him with a faint smile. "Simplicity is our strength, brother. It makes us light in battle and heavy in spirit." His tone carries no pride, only certainty. The afternoon sun warms Leo's face, its light golden and full. The quiet interlude has sharpened his mind and steadied his resolve. Renunciation, he now understands, isn't deprivation, it's the doorway to clarity. He lifts his eyes to the brilliant blue sky stretching over Cyprus, endless and serene. That sky feels eternal, untouched by kingdoms or wars, a symbol of the eternity he seeks through service. Rising from the stone bench, Leo breathes deeply. The air smells of spice and salt, of ships and journeys yet to come. The energy of the fortress hums around him, alive and purposeful. He realizes that the treasure of the Templar Order is not stored in vaults, but in its system, in the living structure of trust, labor, and shared purpose. The knight's wage is the privilege of belonging to it. Protected and provided for, the distant sound of horses neighing drifts through the courtyard, the rhythm of movement returning. Leo is ready. He joins Alain, their pace slow and deliberate as they walk toward the gate, each step a mirror of the quiet strength within. His sword and mantle are his only possessions, functional, symbolic, and enough. He has traded the weight of gold for the lightness of purpose, the comfort of wealth for the honor of meaning. And as they cross into the sunlight, Leo feels a deep gratitude rising in him. He finally understands he is not a poor man. He is a man freed from greed. The final leg of the voyage begins. This time, the ship sails with urgency. The shift is both geographic and emotional. Each mile brings them closer to the Holy Land, where reflection yields to vigilance. The air below deck is thick and stifling, heavy with the mingled sense of sweat, metal, and tar. Leo feels the steady rhythm of the ship beneath him, a motion that now feels like breath itself, familiar, hypnotic, and alive. He's assigned to inspect the cargo hold, a task that reveals a different side of the Templar machine. In the dim, cool air, his hands trace the rough surfaces of barrels and crates, each marked with the red cross of the Order. Here, in this cramped space, lies the true material wage of the Knights: provisions, weapons, and tools. Holding a small oil lamp, he breathes in the scent of wax and damp wood. The faint light glimmers off orderly rows of containers. Beside him, Sergeant Alain's calm voice explains that every item has been logged, weighed, and destined for a specific fortress in the east. Precision, he says, is survival. No knight will ever go hungry or unarmed if the system holds. Leo recalls a fact from the Abbey. The Templars maintained written manuals of inventory and bookkeeping centuries ahead of their time. The perfection of that order, sustained by collective wealth, is his real salary. Provision guaranteed by faith and management. Alain gestures toward a line of barrels. These hold wine, brother, and those fresh water. His tone is patient, instructional. He explains that in the Holy Land, water is rarer than gold. The Order spends vast sums to ensure its purity and supply. Leo runs his fingers along the damp wood of a barrel, feeling the chill seep into his skin. Clean water, he realizes, is a salary more precious than any coin. Nearby, he hears the restless shuffle of horses below deck, the soft thud of hooves against timber, a reminder of the living wealth that carries their wars. Alain tells him of a knight who once fell ill after drinking tainted water in the desert. The rescue took days and cost men and supplies. The moral is clear. Discipline in logistics is not bureaucracy, it's life itself. That lesson echoes deeply. What use is gold, Leo thinks, when true payment is safety, health, and structure? The Order's protection extends beyond armor. It is care, foresight, and unity. He lifts the lamp toward a crate filled with linen and beeswax. The smell is clean and faintly sweet. Inside are fresh mantles, white and folded. The Order will clothe him as it feeds him, from initiation to death. The uniform itself is both symbol and provision, an outward sign of belonging paid for by the Brotherhood's invisible treasury. Nearby lie the swords and lances, neatly stacked. The cool touch of iron glints in the flickering light. Alain notes that these weapons come from the best European smiths, each piece paid for by the Order's wealth and chosen for perfection. Leo recalls another rule. The Templars demanded the finest steel and maintained strict standards for every blade. Their weapons were never ornate, only efficient. That excellence was part of their salary, the assurance of quality in all that sustained them. When they climb back to the deck, the sun floods their vision. The Mediterranean glitters with merciless beauty. The air is hot and salt-laden. Leo inhales deeply, seeing now that the real power of the Templars lies not in individual valor, but in the invisible network that supports it, a chain of labor, wealth, and faith stretching from Europe to Jerusalem. He spots Gervais seated on the deck, his rosary slipping through weathered fingers, lips moving silently. The veteran embodies the truth Leo has come to understand. The reward is not comfort, it's purpose. The absence of gold is proof of purity, not poverty. For the first time, Leo feels no envy toward kings or merchants. He belongs to something greater than either, a machine of discipline guided by devotion. His life is secure, his mission clear. Alain points to the horizon. Faint against the bright line of sky and sea, the coast of the Holy Land rises, dark ridges of mountain and fortress. Leo's heartbeat quickens. The long journey is almost over. And yet, in this moment, he realizes it has only just begun. As the ship nears the Levant, Leo joins Gervais on deck. The veteran knight stands at the bow, peering through a brass spyglass, a costly, finely crafted instrument supplied by the Order. The faint, dry scent of land drifts toward them, mingling with the salt of the sea. Beneath their feet, the rhythm of waves striking the hull sounds no longer like travel, but like anticipation. Gervais lowers the spyglass and offers a quiet lesson. He explains that the Order not only provides weapons and armor, but also invests in knowledge and innovation. Tools like this are among a knight's most valuable wages, granting the precision and vision needed to serve effectively. The wealth of the Order is not simply stored, it's engineered into function. Leo recalls that the Templars were avid collectors of maps and geographic intelligence. Information itself was currency, a strategic salary that could decide victory before the battle began. Gervais tells a brief story. A young knight once lost his spyglass during a skirmish. As penance, he was ordered to spend 3 days in silence. The punishment wasn't for the loss of metal and glass, but for neglecting an instrument of purpose. In the Order, value is measured not in gold, but in function. The air grows hotter and drier. Leo studies Gervais' deliberate movements, the careful way he wipes the lens and folds the cloth. Years of service have turned discipline into devotion. This reverence for every tool mirrors the vow of poverty. By renouncing gold, the Templar learns to honor what truly matters. The ship's bell rings for midday prayer, its tone sharp and commanding. Leo and Gervais kneel on the sun-warmed planks. The chant of the brothers rises softly under the wind. Even here, with land in sight and battle ahead, the rhythm of prayer remains unbroken, the spiritual anchor of the Order. The chaplain lights a small censer, and incense drifts across the deck, its sweet, smoky scent blending with salt and tar. The aroma carries Leo back to the abbey, its quiet cloisters, its stone floors. Worship, constant and structured, is another form of pay, nourishment for the soul, stability for the mind. As he lifts his gaze, the coastline becomes visible, fortresses dotting the horizon, among them the massive keep of Tortosa. Those walls, built of the Order's wealth and labor, are the most tangible symbols of its payment. Shelter and defense for all who serve beneath the cross. Leo realizes that once they land, he will never need to worry about food, lodging, or protection. Every necessity has already been purchased, prepared, and delivered through centuries of organization. Freedom from worldly concern is the richest reward of all. Sergeant Alain appears, pointing toward the growing bustle of the port. "We'll make land by sunset, brother. The landing will be quick and silent." His tone carries authority, but also calm certainty. The rhythm of the mission takes hold. Leo remembers what he learned about the Order's fortresses in the east, each built at a crossroads of trade and pilgrimage, each serving as both bastion and beacon. Architecture as strategy, faith made stone. The sun burns hotter and the sea air shimmers. Gervais remains still, his weathered face serene, a man shaped by renunciation and peace. To Leo, he is the embodiment of what the Templar vow promises: strength through simplicity, freedom through surrender. He looks toward the coastline again. He is no longer a nobleman seeking glory, but a servant within a vast and purposeful design. His payment is already before him: security, brotherhood, and the fortress that awaits his arrival. The cries of gulls echo overhead, sharp and bright. The smell of land, dust, stone, and sun mixes with the scent of salt. Anticipation hums in the air. but it's tempered by the Order's discipline. Leo touches the red cross stitched on his clean white mantle. It is his badge, his salary, his proof of belonging. In that simple symbol lies the wealth of his new life. Before disembarking, he descends once more to the hold to check the horses. The smell of hay and animal fills the air, strong and grounding. He runs a hand along a flank, feeling the steady warmth of life and duty. This too is service. He breathes deeply. He has traded luxury for purpose and solitude for fraternity. His reward is the privilege of serving something enduring. The ship slows. The wind softens. The hull trembles as the anchor drops. They have arrived. Among his brothers, Leo stands ready. The sense of unity, their quiet strength, their collective focus, is the greatest wage he will ever know. As he steps onto solid ground, the sun sets over the walls of the Holy Land, casting the stones in gold. The journey is complete. The air is dry and hot against his face. The transition is total, irreversible. He's no longer a traveler. He's home, in the house of the Order. Leo steps onto solid ground at the bustling port of Acre, one of the Templar Order's main strongholds in the Holy Land. The impact on his senses is overwhelming. The air is thick with salt and eastern spices, saffron, cumin, and cinnamon, mingling with the musk of camels and sweat, a dense, exotic scent unlike anything he has ever known. Around him rises a chorus of sound, shouts in Arabic, Greek, and French, merchants calling, crates being dragged, the heartbeat of a living crossroads between worlds. The sight of Acre itself stuns him. Towering pale walls rise from a city of sun-bleached stone, glowing white under the harsh Levantine light. The heat presses through his mantle, dry and penetrating, a constant reminder of both how far he's come and how close he now stands to his purpose. Sergeant Alain moves quickly through the crowd, setting a disciplined pace. Leo follows, his senses sharpened, sight, smell, and hearing all heightened by the foreignness around him. The Order had trained him for simplicity, yet here he finds himself in the very center of worldly complexity, trade, culture, faith, and war converging at once. Alain gestures toward a vast warehouse bearing the red cross of the Order. "That's where the ship's cargo will be unloaded," he says. Leo realizes this building is more than storage. It's a treasury of sustenance, the vault that manages the wages of every knight in the East. He remembers something the abbot once told him. In the Holy Land, Templar diet was carefully managed. A high-protein regimen meant to maintain strength without indulgence. Rations were measured to the ounce. Food was not pleasure, it was precision. Leo touches the hilt of his sword. The cool metal grounds him, familiar amid the chaos. Somewhere nearby, the whinnying of Templar horses rises, a sharp, disciplined sound cutting through the noise of the city. It feels like home. As they walk, Alain recounts a story, a warning. A knight, newly arrived, had once succumbed to the luxury of Eastern goods and spent all he had on perfumes and spices. The fall from discipline cost him dearly. The moral was clear. In a place overflowing with temptation, renunciation is armor. A gust of air carries the tang of forge smoke from a nearby smithy. Leo turns and sees sparks leap into the sun. The Order employs its own blacksmiths here, ensuring every sword and plate of armor is repaired with care, the knight's wage of maintenance and readiness. From within the fortress walls, a low hum of Latin prayer drifts into the open port. Ora et labora. Even amid commerce and conflict, the chant endures. It is the pulse beneath the noise. Inside the Templar compound, the contrast is immediate. Outside, chaos. Inside, calm. The cool scent of stone and faint incense replaces the dust and spice of the city. The fortress feels invincible, a bastion of discipline against the world's uncertainty. That security, Leo realizes, is one of the greatest salaries the Order bestows. He recalls another custom of the Order: strict cleanliness and dress codes. Every knight's appearance had to reflect the purity of his spirit. Dirt and disarray were seen as signs of neglect, not humility. Alain leads him to the dormitory, a long, austere hall of straw beds. The air is dry but not suffocating. The rough straw beneath his fingertips feels honest, grounding. Veteran knights move quietly around the room, tending armor or praying. Their faces, scarred and calm, speak of endurance and brotherhood. Leo understands now. This shared silence, this discipline, this community is his true payment. He finds his assigned bed, where a wooden chest bears his name. Inside, a spare mantle, a rosary, and the few personal items allowed. The emptiness of the chest is strangely comforting. It's proof that he owns nothing and lacks nothing. Alain explains that each knight receives a fixed ration of wine and bread each night, simple but sufficient. It is the Order's most fundamental wage, sustenance without indulgence. The faint smell of olive oil from the lamps fills the air, warm, utilitarian, pure. Every necessity is accounted for, every comfort stripped of excess. The Order's wealth expresses itself through certainty, not luxury. Leo recalls a story whispered among the brothers. After the fall of a distant fortress, a knight arrived in Acre with nothing but his mantle and his faith. Within days, he was rearmed, reclothed, and restored. The Order never abandons its own. He breathes deeply. In this place, surrounded by order, provision, and purpose, he feels complete. The absence of gold, he realizes, is not loss, but liberation. Outside, the sun sinks swiftly behind the walls of Acre. A low, resonant bell tolls for curfew, its sound deep and commanding. The noise of the city fades, replaced by stillness. Leo sits on his straw bed, the last warmth of the day fading from his skin. He has food, shelter, armor, and faith. He has brothers beside him, and a purpose before him. And as the night closes in over the Holy Land, he understands he has everything a Templar could ever be paid to possess. Leo settles into his bunk in the dormitory of Acre. Around him, the soft rustle of other knights preparing for rest fills the hall, a quiet murmur of exhaustion and brotherhood that soothes him. The air carries the faint scent of straw and wool, the fragrance of simple survival. He runs a hand across the coarse bedding, the rough texture reminding him that even rest here is a form of discipline. Before lying down, Sergeant Alain approaches and shares one last story for the night. "The brothers of the temple," he says softly, "sleep on linen sheets, but humility forbids more than one. Too much comfort dulls the spirit." His tone is warm but firm, the lesson clear. Renunciation is a constant companion. Even in the smallest details, Leo realizes the Templar life is ruled by austerity. Comfort is never the reward. Discipline is. Every rule, every denial, forges a spirit that cannot be tempted or broken. He recalls a story from one of the sergeants, about a knight who, instead of lamenting poverty, used his free hours to teach his squire to read and write. The true reward, the man said, was not wealth, but service, the passing of knowledge, the shaping of another soul. The wind slips through narrow slits in the stone wall, its gentle hum blending with the breathing of sleeping men. Leo listens and synchronizes his own slow breaths to the rhythm of that wind. Peace spreads through him, soft but complete, even with war looming beyond the horizon. He thinks of the fortress kitchens and storerooms below, stacked with provisions, amphorae of oil, and sacks of grain. The aroma of spices and olive oil he noticed earlier lingers faintly, a quiet promise of sustenance. His wage of nourishment is security itself. His fingers trace the red cross stitched onto his mantle, the familiar symbol of belonging and protection. It is his greatest wealth, a sign of faith, loyalty, and purpose that no coin could ever replace. The memory of the port returns, the chaos, the temptations, the dizzying mix of voices and scents. This dormitory, by contrast, feels like a refuge, a sanctuary of order amid disorder. The stillness of the order against the turbulence of the world feels almost holy. Alain extinguishes the main lamp, leaving only a single night flame flickering in the corner. Its faint, oily scent of burning olive fills the room, a smell of vigilance. The flame is small but steady, a reminder that a knight must always remain ready, even in rest. The dry heat of the air invites him to relax. He understands now that true freedom comes from not having to think about money. The Order's wealth frees him from worry. It's a rare kind of peace, earned through faith. He reflects that his pay is purpose itself. The Order has bought him not with silver, but with meaning, with the chance to live and die for something eternal. He traded a fleeting fortune for a life that would echo through legend. From the adjoining stable comes the soft clatter of hooves and the sound of hay being chewed. That rhythm comforts him. His horse is his tool, his companion, his wage of movement, provided and cared for by the same system that shelters him. He closes his eyes and imagines the massive walls of Acre's fortress, his physical shield against the chaos beyond. The Order is his fortress, his armor, his certainty. The memory of the voyage drifts through his thoughts, the sea, the rocking ship, the endless horizon. That journey was more than passage. It was initiation. Movement is the essence of his calling, and the Order is what keeps it in motion. The feel of the straw beneath his tunic is humbling. It scratches lightly against his skin, a reminder that comfort is the enemy of clarity. He finds peace in this humility, in knowing that detachment is the path to service. His breath slows. His body aligns with the steady rhythm of the Order, his mind with the pulse of faith. The day's noise fades, replaced by quiet certainty. Tomorrow he'll receive his sword and shield, his tools for the defense of the faith. His salary will be made of steel, precision, and trust. And as his eyes grow heavy, Leo feels the vastness of the brotherhood surrounding him, unseen but unbroken. His payment is safety, his reward is honor. He falls asleep knowing one simple truth. He owns no gold, but he has everything that truly matters. Life at the Templar house in Acre soon settles into a slow rhythm of repetition. The days move with the measured pulse of discipline, a gradual shifting of pace and temperature that carries Leo farther and farther from his old European life. The air in Acre is dry and hot, but within the fortress walls, the thick stone keeps everything cool and dim. That shade becomes his comfort, his new definition of peace. Mornings are spent in the inner courtyard, training under the harsh sun. The clang of steel on steel echoes endlessly, the metallic heartbeat of the Order. The air smells of sweat, oiled leather, and sharpened metal, the scent of purpose. Now fully equipped, Leo feels the weight of his chainmail press into his shoulders, a cold, heavy touch, his most tangible payment of protection. Sergeant Alain and Gervais oversee the drills. Gervais, steady and precise, reminds the younger knights that the armor they wear is not theirs, but the Order's, a gift of trust, not ownership. Your armor belongs to all who serve, he says. You only wear it for them. The message is simple. A Templar's wealth is collective. His reward is the privilege of being part of the system that sustains him. Leo senses the slow transformation within himself, the exchange of luxury for functionality. He murmurs the words that have become his mantra. Simplicity is strength. Silk has given way to rough wool, fine wine to clean water, vanity to vigilance. Alain explains the rotation of guards and patrols, an unending cycle of watchfulness. Each man is paid not in coins but in safety. Their true wage is the certainty of being protected by their brothers, always. The training is grueling. Muscles ache, sweat stings his eyes, yet the pain feels holy, a physical reminder of commitment. As the sun descends, long shadows stretch across the courtyard. Leo glances at Gervais, whose endurance never falters. His calm is a lesson in itself, a living embodiment of the Order's resilience. Gervais shares a somber story. A knight once deserted during a patrol, fleeing with his horse and armor. He was caught, and though stripped of his rank and mantle, the greatest punishment was exile, the loss of brotherhood. His sorrow wasn't for gold, but for belonging. Leo understands. A Templar's salary cannot be traded or taken elsewhere. It exists only in service. No treasure in the world could purchase what he has gained, the purpose of being part of something eternal. The bell tolls for evening. The courtyard dims, light softens into ochre and grey. The change in tone brings calm introspection. Leo makes his way to the refectory, following the faint smell of stew and baked bread. Dinner is always the same: coarse bread, watered wine, and lentil stew. The flavor is plain but sustaining. The silence of the meal is broken only by the reading of scripture, a gentle rhythm reminding them that even eating is a form of prayer. He reflects on the vast estates across Europe that feed this simplicity. Every mouthful of bread here in Acre has crossed oceans of faith and structure. Individual poverty, he thinks, is the price of collective abundance. The worn wood of his spoon feels smooth against his palm, a small, humble reminder that he's been freed from greed and excess. His new wealth is measured in discipline. The steady hum of Latin prayer fills the hall, rising and falling like the sea. The Order's spiritual rigor mirrors its military precision. Both are forms of strength. This, too, is his payment, the privilege of belonging to such harmony. He recalls one of the Order's rules: no one eats alone. Solitude breeds indulgence. Community guards virtue. Shared meals, shared silence, shared purpose. That is the Templar Brotherhood's truest currency. After the meal, Leo moves to the chapel for Compline. Candlelight flickers along the stone, shadows stretching tall and reverent. He kneels, feeling the cool hardness beneath his knees, a tactile reminder of humility. The incense burns sweet and thick, mingling devotion with the faint memory of sweat and steel. The slow transition from the day's harshness to this quiet warmth feels like a passage from action to contemplation. He reflects that his reward is not treasure, but transcendence. The white mantle and red cross, simple yet sacred, are his emblems of meaning. His life now belongs to a purpose that outlasts wealth. Each day follows the same gentle cadence: polishing armor, training, prayer, simple meals. Repetition becomes rhythm, and rhythm becomes peace. The chaos of the world has been replaced by the order of faith. Outside, the wind whispers softly through the courtyard arches. Leo feels its touch on his skin, cool and pure. Peace fills him, not the peace of comfort, but of surrender. As he prepares for sleep, he knows he is fully provided for, fed, armed, and sheltered. The wealth of the Brotherhood is his shield, and within that shield he rests in absolute serenity. Leo walks back to the dormitory after Compline, the warm Levantine air brushing against his face. The slow, measured footsteps of his brothers echo down the corridor, a sound of shared rhythm and quiet unity. He's growing used to communal life, a stark contrast to the solitude of his noble chamber back home. The slow transformation of his social world is the steady acceptance of brotherhood. He lies down on his straw bed, feeling the roughness beneath his tunic. The coarse texture presses against his skin like a reminder of his vow of poverty. The absence of comfort is, in itself, a kind of payment, discipline forged into the fiber of a soldier of Christ. From the corner of the hall comes the faint crackle of an olive oil lamp. Its smell, slightly bitter, faintly rancid, fills the room, the scent of vigilance. The small, flickering flame, maintained through the night, symbolizes constant readiness, the knight's salary of perpetual service. He recalls a fact Alain once shared. In Acre, the order maintained hospitals and infirmaries to care for the wounded and sick. That medical care, funded by the collective wealth of the temple, was another essential form of payment, protection, provision, and dignity in weakness. Leo remembers the abbot Etienne's quiet promise: the order will never let you starve, never leave you unguarded. He traded the risk of personal fortune for the certainty of communal sustenance, a safety guaranteed by the largest and most disciplined organization of its age. He closes his eyes and envisions his white mantle, spotless and carefully maintained. To him, it's more than fabric. It's a currency of honor, proof of belonging to something vast and holy. The red cross stitched across it is both burden and blessing. Sergeant Alain's footsteps move past his bed, slow and deliberate. The familiar sound of authority and vigilance reassures Leo that the fortress never sleeps. Someone is always watching. Someone is always protecting. The air is dry and heavy. Time in the fortress feels slower, almost suspended, a rhythm that contrasts sharply with the frantic pace of the outside world. In that slowness lies serenity, the peace that comes with knowing exactly why you rise each morning. He recalls a story Gervais once told of an older Templar who never married and devoted his life to training the order's horses. That man found his true family not through blood, but through service. Celibacy, Gervais had said, was not deprivation, but devotion, a redirection of the heart toward purpose. Leo understands now that his slow transformation is the quiet replacement of ego with mission. Gold is useless here. Service fills the space where ambition once lived. The distant bells of Acre toll faintly through the night, their sound softened by the stone walls. Beyond them lies the restless city, but here, inside the fortress, is stillness, a refuge carved from discipline. He thinks of his sword and horse, the tools entrusted to him. They are not possessions, but responsibilities, resources belonging to the order, sustained by the collective. His care for them is his wage of stewardship. Peace seeps into him as he accepts austerity. Simplicity is armor against temptation. Restraint is clarity. He has exchanged comfort for the privilege of purpose. The image of the sea returns, the voyage that brought him to the center of history. Motion is the essence of his calling, and the order, unyielding and vast, is his anchor. The straw beneath his head scratches lightly, humble and grounding. He drifts towards sleep with the quiet certainty of one who is safe, fed, and where he is meant to be. The peace that comes from having no worldly concern envelops him. The Templar's true wage is the fullness of purpose and the completeness of provision. He thinks of Gervais, the veteran whose calm presence embodies what he seeks, the serenity of renunciation. That image stays with him as his breath slows. The wind hums softly through the narrow window. The air is warm, the night still. His body relaxes, his mind settles into rhythm. He sleeps deeply, held by faith and order, already ready for the next dawn of service. The wealth of brotherhood is his eternal reward. As the months passed, Leo's life blended seamlessly into a rhythm of disciplined duty and quiet devotion, a perfect balance between soldier and monk. The dry, warm air of Acre no longer felt foreign. The cool stillness inside the fortress had become a kind of refuge, a physical reflection of his growing inner calm. The once overwhelming scent of spice and sea salt drifting from the port was now simply the fragrance of routine. He spent his afternoons in the fortress library, a room surprisingly cool and silent amid the desert heat. The only sound was the gentle scratch of a quill across parchment, a soft rhythm of record-keeping and order. The feel of old parchment under his fingertips was delicate and smooth, so unlike the coarse steel of his chainmail. Beside him, a fellow brother worked carefully through ledgers, and Leo assisted, cataloguing inventories, a quiet task that let his mind wander back through the long path of his journey, reflecting on the practical side of his wages. He ran his eyes down a list of goods shipped from Aquitaine: grain, wine, oil, horses. The handwriting was precise, each item accounted for. He remembered his first night in the abbey, when he still thought in terms of gold and inheritance. Now he understood that the true wealth of the order lived within these pages, the ability to sustain an army halfway across the world with unwavering reliability. The administrator beside him spoke softly, sharing a fact about the order's financial genius. "We sell our surplus to the merchants of Acre," he explained. "The proceeds return to the mission, to the care of our men, to the defense of pilgrims, to the feeding of the poor." Leo nodded slowly. Logistics was the engine that drove everything. It was proof that the temple was not only an army, but an economy, a living, breathing system of faith and function. He realized that his wage of provision wasn't charity, but the product of impeccable management, an inheritance traded for access to a network that spanned continents. He had given up his personal fortune for something far greater, the security of a global brotherhood. A faint smile crossed his face as he remembered the symbol of two knights sharing one horse, the emblem of Templar humility. The absence of individual wealth is the price of collective strength, he whispered to himself. That truth had brought him peace. The deep toll of the fortress bell cut through the library's quiet, calling for midday prayer. The sound echoed like an anchor in his mind. He set down his quill and joined the procession toward the chapel, where the heavy scent of incense and beeswax thickened the air, an aroma of worship and constancy. Inside, sunlight streamed through high windows, painting streaks of gold across the stone floor. Near the altar, Gervais knelt in silence, his head bowed, motionless. Seeing the veteran, so still, so serene, filled Leo with renewed conviction. Honor and purpose, he thought, were the only currencies that mattered. He recalled the small story Gervais had once told him, of a knight punished not for losing a binocular, but for neglecting it. The value, Leo now understood, had never been in the object, but in the care it represented. Stewardship was sacred. Tending to what the order provided was a form of gratitude, a way to honor one's salary of trust and provision. The sunlight grew stronger, filtering through the incense haze. The warmth on his skin was gentle but commanding, a reminder that he now stood in the heart of the world's struggle, sustained by the invisible wealth of the temple. He felt the nearness of completion, the quiet gravity of transformation. Soon he would receive the white mantle and red cross, symbols not only of status but of surrender. The garments would seal his vows and mark his passage from novice to brother. His mind drifted briefly to the voyage that had brought him here. The ship, the sea, the sense of safety bought not with coins but with faith and organization. The journey itself had been part of his payment, a logistical miracle powered by collective will. The cold stone beneath his knees pressed into him like a lesson in humility. In this stillness, he found total acceptance. Renunciation, he knew now, was not loss, it was freedom. As he left the chapel, the hum of life in the courtyard returned to him. Horses snorting, blacksmiths hammering, the rhythm of endless preparation. The temple was always in motion, always ready. He was now part of that readiness, an essential piece of a perfect machine. The air smelled of sweat and metal, sharp and vital. Soon he would be given his sword and shield, his wages of armament. They would not be possessions, but sacred trusts, the privilege of fighting for faith. And for the first time, Leo felt not like a man who had given something up, but like one who had finally received everything worth having. Leo walks toward the dormitory. the afternoon sun pressing warm against his back. The light is sharp and blinding, and when he glances down, his shadow stretches long and dark across the dusty ground, a clear reminder that his old life lies firmly behind him. The scent of hot stone and Levantine dust rises with each step, no longer foreign or harsh. It smells finally like home. He sits on his straw bed and silently takes stock of what he owns. There is no gold among his possessions, yet he has everything a knight could need: his mantle, his armor, his horses, and the certainty of constant provision. He repeats to himself the lesson carved deep into his mind: true wealth is usefulness and purpose. He recalls one final historical curiosity from his lessons. Templars were allowed to line their cloaks with sheepskin for warmth in winter, but the use of furs from the hunt, or any kind of ornament, was strictly forbidden. Even in comfort, moderation ruled. The rule balanced necessity with discipline, ensuring survival without vanity. The rhythm of daily prayer drifts faintly through the stone walls, a low, continuous chant from the chapel, somewhere within the fortress. Its sound settles over him like cool water. Devotion, he realizes, is his spiritual wage, the quiet promise of salvation earned through service. His hand finds the familiar texture of his rosary at his belt, its wooden beads worn smooth by repetition. As he touches them, memories of his long journey from Aquitaine surface, the slow, deliberate movement that carried him to this center of purpose. Material detachment had made him light enough to travel far. He pictures the vast network of commanderies that sustain him, the fields, the ships, the granaries, the brothers counting ledgers in distant lands. Every bite of food, every thread of cloth, every piece of armor is paid for by that collective wealth. The brotherhood itself is his financial security. He remembers a story told by Alain about a Templar wounded in battle who was nursed back to health in the Order's infirmary by a brother physician. That act of care, sustained by the Temple's treasure, was a salary beyond measure, the preservation of life itself. Sergeant Alain passes through the dormitory, his steps steady and deliberate, eyes scanning the rows of beds. His quiet authority fills the room with reassurance. The presence of his brothers is Leo's final proof that he is safe, watched over, and never alone. He understands now that completing his novitiate means full acceptance of the discipline that governs every breath of Templar life. He no longer mourns what he gave up. Instead, he values the freedom that comes from serving without the weight of worldly concern. The deep, solemn toll of the curfew bell reverberates through the fortress. Leo begins to ready himself for rest, his thoughts clear, his spirit still. Serenity seeps into him like light fading from the sky. He lies back, feeling the coarse straw press against his shoulders. Soon the sword will be his, the final symbol of duty and faith. The wage of his life is purpose itself. As his eyes grow heavy, he envisions the white mantle adorned with the red cross, the mark of honor, sacrifice, and belonging. In that vision he finds peace. Morning breaks softly over Acre, warm but gentle, the air clear and sharp without the haze from the port. Sunlight from the Levant pours freely into the courtyard of the temple's fortress, gilding the stones with a golden calm. Leo walks toward the chapel for his vows, carried by a deep sense of peace, a feeling of completion and return. The fragrance of frankincense and beeswax fills the air, the same scent he had breathed on his first night in the Abbey of Aquitaine. It is the aroma of beginnings coming full circle. The low, steady chant of monks in Latin rises within the chapel, a melody of surrender and acceptance. Kneeling before the Master of the Order in the Holy Land, Leo feels his mind clear and still. This is the moment of exchange, his name, his past, his possessions, for the identity of a Miles Christie, a soldier of Christ. The Master, tall and composed, speaks in a calm, resonant voice. "Do you renounce all personal possessions and any expectation of payment?" Leo answers firmly, his voice steady and sure, carrying every lesson he has learned. "I renounce all wealth and the hope of gold. My wage is the sustenance of the order, the provision of my arms, the safety of my brothers, and the privilege of serving God." A faint smile crosses the master's face, a gesture of approval that fills Leo with quiet pride. He now understands that the order's immense wealth exists not for indulgence, but for endurance, that its strength lies in shared poverty and disciplined abundance. His salary is the certainty that he will always have what he needs for the mission, free from the burden of desire. The armor presented to him glints under the sunlight, its surface cold, its weight firm, chainmail, helm, and shield, all marked with the red cross. Leo accepts them reverently, knowing they are not his to own but to guard, entrusted to him by the order, a payment in the finest form of protection. He thinks of the provisions that will sustain him, simple rations, a horse, a bed in the castles of the order. There will be no coins in his pouch, only the quiet security of knowing that his needs will always be met. That is the wealth of his new life. When the master places the white mantle upon his shoulders, Leo feels the coarse wool brush his neck, a texture both humble and holy. It is the symbol of purity and belonging, of status earned through faith. He remembers the image of that mantle catching the sun, the light of purpose spreading over him like grace. The brothers draw their swords in a single motion, a dry, solemn sound that echoes through the chapel. It is the sound of acceptance, of kinship sealed. Leo feels the weight of the moment anchor him in the present. Of all his wages, this is the greatest, to belong. He looks down at the red cross embroidered over his heart, the mark that binds faith to duty, prayer to steel. He has exchanged his family's coat of arms for a higher emblem, the sign of divine purpose. The master closes the ceremony with words that bridge Leo's past and future. "You have traded what is uncertain for what is eternal," he says, "and what is fleeting for what endures." The cadence of his voice carries the memory of Abbot Etienne, completing the circle of Leo's journey. Leo rises, feeling an unexpected lightness in his chest. He is now a Knight Templar. The emptiness of his pockets no longer means poverty. It is proof of freedom. He has found something far greater than gold, a life of purpose, honor, and service. His true reward is to serve God and guard the pilgrims of the Holy Land, a purpose richer than any treasure ever forged by men. With the white mantle of the order draped over his shoulders, Leo feels the full weight and solemnity of the moment. The sound of the wind, sweeping in from the sea, drifts through the chapel, an echo of the life awaiting him, a life of constant service between the sea and the desert. He thinks of the vast estates of the temple that will forever sustain him, a poetic image of provision and divine order. The feel of his newly entrusted sword, cold and heavy in his hand, is the final seal of his new identity. He knows the weapon does not belong to him, it belongs to the order, and its care will be part of his salary of responsibility. He recalls his naive expectations of wealth back in Aquitaine. Now, with quiet gratitude, he reflects on how he traded the uncertainty of gold for the certainty of purpose, a transaction of infinite worth. The absence of money has become his greatest security. The master of the order invites him to join the other knights in the courtyard. The procession moves slowly, deliberately, each step marked by reverence. The scent of warm bread and olive oil rises in the air, the humble fragrance of breakfast, his wage of daily sustenance. Passing Gervais, the veteran knight, Leo receives a simple nod of acknowledgement. The older man's serenity mirrors the future that awaits him, a life anchored in peace, renunciation, and steady discipline. The strong, resonant toll of the fortress bells calls out the first hour, setting the rhythm of the day. Leo feels himself perfectly attuned to that rhythm, the rhythm of the Order, built on service and devotion. He pictures the great Templar fortresses scattered across the Holy Land, solid, unyielding, eternal. Their protection and strength are his wage of safety, a privilege no earthly fortune could ever buy. The dry scent of Levantine dust fills the air around him, grounding him in reality and commitment. He knows he is exactly where he is meant to be, in the heart of the mission, fully provided for and divinely guarded. His true payment, he realizes, isn't a coin that rusts, but an honor that endures, a purpose that stretches beyond his lifetime. The wealth of the Order is the promise of salvation. He feels the warmth of the sun on his white mantle, a gentle heat that calls him to action. His mind is clear, his spirit focused. He remembers the story of the sergeant who lost his family and found a new home in the Order, brotherhood and belonging. These are his emotional and social wages. Leo's fingers trace the red cross on his mantle, the emblem of his new family. He has exchanged luxury for purpose, vanity for discipline. The faint murmur of the sea drifts into the courtyard, reminding him of the vast network that sustains him, from the farms of Aquitaine to the walls of Acre. He joins his brothers at the breakfast table, a ritual of simplicity and communion. The bread and diluted wine are the pillars of their diet, his salary of sustenance. The feel of the worn wooden spoon in his hand reminds him of humility. Every meal, every sip, is a reminder of gratitude and restraint. He thinks back to his novitiate journey, the slow, deliberate transformation that led him to understanding. The renunciation of gold, he realizes, is the key to spiritual freedom. The master addresses the gathered knights, his deep voice resonating through the hall. He speaks of purpose and sacrifice, and Leo feels himself a single, vital link in the chain of faith and service. Looking up, Leo gazes at the blue sky over Acre, vast and clear. In its immensity, he feels peace and certainty. God's glory, he knows, is the only reward worth striving for. The Order has paid him with a life of legend, a purpose that will outlive his body and name. He is not rich, but he is a man of great worth. He is at peace with the absence of possessions. Discipline and service are the only treasures he will ever need. The sound of horses neighing in the stables nearby rises like a signal of readiness. Leo is prepared for the mission, equipped, sustained, and unafraid. He thinks again of the poetic image of his white mantle, his shield, his honor, his second skin. He is home now, within the house of the Order. Serenity fills him as he accepts his destiny. The story closes gently, wrapped in the certainty that he has found his purpose. He rises from the table, renewed by quiet peace. Leo looks toward the horizon, not toward gold, but toward the light of purpose. He has traded fortune for a life of meaning and honor. He rests that night knowing his choice was the richest of all. Until tomorrow, traveler, come with me again through these forgotten ages. You already know where to find me, right here between history and dream. Like this story, subscribe and sleep well, fellow traveler.